A big thank you to Nguyen Hai and Nguyen Lin for your support. Now, let's get back to the video. The teleportation formation beneath Han Li and the others continued to operate, but it was getting slower and slower, and the white light that it was releasing was also rapidly fading. In the meantime, the four of them remained silent and didn't make any further attempts to move. They took this time to inspect their surroundings, but of course, the majority of their attention was focused on that silver mountain. The longing in Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan's eyes was becoming more and more intense, while Han Li remained expressionless, and Lu Yuking's eyes were constantly darting around, occasionally stealing glances at Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan. A short while later, the operation of the teleportation formation finally completely ceased, and all of the white light also faded, allowing Han Li and the others to emerge from the formation. Let's go. Upon stepping out of the formation, Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan made their way down from the stone platform, then rushed toward the long staircase at the foot of the silver mountain, but they refrained from taking flight. Let's follow them, Han Li said to Lu Yuking, then quickly strode down from the stone platform as well. Not long after the four of them left the teleportation formation, the stone platform behind them abruptly shuddered, immediately following which the teleportation formation began to radiate dazzling white light once again. Han Li and the others were all quite startled by this turn of events, and they immediately stopped in their tracks before turning around, right as a group of 6 or 7 figures appeared within the teleportation formation. These people were none other than the black-robed ghost whale sect cultivators, and they were led by their sect master, Chen Pai. Zhu Han, Patriarch Cold Flame, exclaimed at the sight of ghost whale sect master. A hint of befuddlement flashed through Han Li's eyes upon hearing this. The ghost whale sect master had clearly been introduced as Chen Pai earlier, while Zhu Han was the name of one of the ubiquitous pavilion's golden immortal stage elders, and one of the 2 golden immortals who had attacked the holy puppet sect. Having just appeared in the teleportation formation, Zhu Han's expression was a little dazed, but he then immediately returned to his senses. He took a glance at his surroundings, and his gaze settled momentarily on Han Li and Lu Yuking before immediately shifting to Xingshan and Patriarch Cold Flame. Meanwhile, Xingshan and Patriarch Cold Flame exchanged a bewildered glance with one another. It didn't take long before Zhu Han spotted the purple palace on the mountain summit, and an ecstatic look instantly appeared on his face as he cackled. "I knew it." A fearful look flashed through Patriarch Cold Flame's eye as he asked, "Zhu Han, why are you here? You thought you managed to shake us off, didn't you? I knew you had an ulterior motive for entering the Immortal Manor, so I intentionally let you leave, but we've been following you this entire time. Having said that, I didn't think you would lead us to the Light Frost Palace," Zhu Han chortled. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. It was rather disturbing to him that he had completely failed to detect the ghost whale sect cultivators on the way here. However, given Zhu Han's golden immortal stage cultivation base, if he had some special concealment techniques up his sleeve, then it was certainly possible for them to have remained undetected by Han Li this entire time. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan's expressions had darkened significantly at this point. They had thought that they had been quite sneaky and cautious, but this entire time, they had been followed by 2 groups of people and remained completely oblivious. The 2 of them exchanged a glance, then turned in unison to rush toward the staircase as quickly as they could. Han Li and Lu Yuking exchanged a glance, then immediately followed along. Zhu Han remained completely unconcerned upon seeing this, and he chuckled coldly. "You think you can get away? In your dreams." There was no way that a group of 4 true immortals would be able to escape from a seasoned golden immortal like himself, particularly in what was clearly a sealed space with no way out. With that in mind, he proceeded to pursue Han Li and the others, only to also find himself being held in place by a burst of tremendous force, rendering him immobilized despite his golden, immortal stage cultivation base. He immediately let loose a low roar as he struggled with all his might, but to his surprise, his efforts proved to be futile. At this point, the other ghost whale sect cultivators were also beginning to regain their consciousness one after another, only to find that they were also unable to move. Han Li and the others seized this opportunity to rush to the foot of the silver staircase as quickly as they could, following which Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan immediately led the way up the staircase. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he noticed that the two of them had slowed down significantly upon stepping onto the staircase, and he cautiously set foot onto the first step. A layer of faint yellow light surfaced over the step beneath his foot, and a burst of tremendous force instantly descended upon him. Lu Yuqing also stepped onto the staircase, following which her body immediately swayed slightly as an alarmed look appeared on her face. Her brows furrowed slightly as a layer of azure light appeared over her body, then transformed into a crane projection that spread its wings in an attempt to take flight. But no matter how frantically the azure crane projection flapped its wings, the suction force acting upon Lu Yuqing from the step beneath her foot wasn't diminished in the slightest. The gravitational restriction on this staircase can't be countered through the use of immortal spiritual power or any spirit treasures, so you can only rely on your own physical prowess, Patriarch Cold Flame explained. Given the urgency of the situation, I'm afraid I'll have to go on ahead. Good luck. Han Li's expression remained unchanged upon hearing this, while Lu Yuqing's complexion paled slightly in response. Meanwhile, Patriarch Cold Flame continued to quickly scale the staircase. Having also cultivated the great universe origin arts, he had attained immense physical prowess, and at this point, he had already scaled 30 to 40 steps. Xing Shan's physical prowess was lacking compared with Patriarch Cold Flame, but he was clearly also prepared, and he was able to keep up with Patriarch Cold Flame just fine. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he turned to take a glance at the ghost whale sect cultivators, who were still trapped in the teleportation formation. The white light radiating from the formation was rapidly fading, and it wouldn't be long until they were freed. "Hurry," he urged as he began to quickly scale the staircase. Lu Yuqing swept a sleeve through the air to dispel the azure light around her, then took a deep breath as she also began to climb the staircase. The gravitational restriction on the staircase was indeed quite formidable, but as an early true immortal cultivator, her physical constitution was nothing to be scoffed at, so she was also climbing up the steps at a decent pace. An agitated look appeared on Zhu Han's face as he watched Han Li and the others scaling the staircase. At this point, he had already realized further struggles would only be futile, so he had resigned himself to waiting. Finally, the white light radiating from the teleportation formation completely faded, and he instantly instructed, "After them." Immediately thereafter, he flew toward Han Li and others as quickly as he could, followed by the other ghost whale sect cultivators. But as soon as they flew out of the stone platform, they abruptly began to plummet toward the ground like dead weights. They slammed into the ground one after another amid a string of resounding booms, smashing several huge craters into the ground in the process. They hurriedly clambered to their feet, and even though they weren't injured, they had been reduced to a rather disheveled state. A few of them had landed head first and were a little dazed as a result. Zhu Han was furious at the embarrassment that he had been subjected to, and none of the other ghost whale sect cultivators dared to say anything at the sight of his enraged expression. "So what if there's a flight restriction here? I'll hunt you all down regardless, and once I do, I'm going to make you regret ever going against me." Zhu Han spat through gritted teeth. Immediately thereafter, He charged toward the staircase as quickly as he could, followed closely by the other ghost whale sect cultivators. Before long, all of them arrived at the foot of the silver staircase before immediately embarking on the climb. As soon as he set foot on the first step, Zhu Han's brows instantly furrowed slightly, and he took a deep breath as he cautioned, "There's quite a formidable restriction here, so be on your guard." All of the other ghost whale sect cultivators hurriedly gave affirmative responses, while Zhu Han took a glance at Han Li and the others before setting off in pursuit of them. He was able to scale the staircase at a remarkable speed, quickly opening up quite a large gap between himself and the rest of the ghost whale sect cultivators, and it seemed that the gravitational restriction here wasn't affecting him much at all. At this point, Han Li and the others had already scaled 400 to 500 steps, and Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan were still leading the way from the forefront, with Han Li and Lu Yuqing progressing up the staircase together a short distance behind them. Upon noticing what was happening down below, a grim look appeared on Patriarch Cold Flame's face, and a layer of faint starlight appeared over his body as he abruptly accelerated. Xingshan's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and a layer of golden light emerged over his body as he also sped up in an urgent fashion. Meanwhile, Lu Yuqing was already sweating profusely, and with each step that she took, her body would shudder slightly. With each successive step, the gravitational restriction would become slightly more formidable, and at this point, the gravitational force was already 3 to 4 times stronger than it had been on the first step. Lu Yuqing turned to glance at Han Li, and she was surprised to find that he didn't appear to be struggling at all. However, there was a rather peculiar dazed look in his eyes, as if his thoughts were somewhere else entirely. "Brother Liu," Lu Yuqing called out to him through voice transmission. Han Li immediately snapped back to his senses, then turned to her as he asked, "What is it?" Lu Yuqing forced a smile onto her own face as she said, "The restriction here is too strong for me to continue. Go ahead without me, Brother Liu." Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he turned to find Zhu Han rapidly scaling the staircase, doing so with such ease that he wasn't even pausing from one step to the next. At this point, it wasn't going to take long before he caught up to them. Meanwhile, Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan were only accelerating further, and they had already left Han Li and Lu Yuqing far behind. "Don't worry about me, Brother Liu. These people have no vendetta against me, and I'm just a nobody anyway, so I'm sure they won't do anything to me," Lu Yuqing said. Han Li hesitated momentarily, then suddenly strode over to Lu Yuqing's side before picking her up in his arms. Lu Yuqing was swept off her feet before she even had a chance to react, and the force weighing down on her was instantly lifted, while the gravitational force acting upon Han Li was doubled. However, this was still well within his tolerance capacity, and he began to quickly bound up the staircase. "Brother Liu, I agreed to bring you with me, so I have to do everything in my power to keep you safe," Han Li said in an indifferent voice. A complex look appeared in Lu Yuqing's eyes as she lowered her head. Both Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan had noticed what Han Li was doing, and they were quite taken aback by his actions. "Looks like you found yourself quite a womanizer of an ally, fellow Taoist Cold Flame. I must say, I do admire his courage," Xingshan jeered with a mocking look in his eyes. Patriarch Cold Flame's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. Even with his physical prowess and extensive preparation, he didn't dare to take this gravitational restriction lightly at all, and he certainly wasn't optimistic about Han Li's chances of scaling the staircase while carrying an extra burden. With that in mind, a cold look flashed through his eyes as he turned his gaze away from Han Li. Meanwhile, Han Li was accelerating further and further, to the point that his speed was comparable with Zhu Han's, and as a result, the gap between them was steadily maintained. Zhu Han's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, while Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan were both quite surprised. Never had they anticipated that Han Li would only be getting faster in this situation. In fact, he was beginning to slowly catch up to them. Both of them immediately renewed their efforts, accelerating further themselves, and before long, over an hour had already passed by. At this point, all of them had already crossed the halfway mark of the staircase, and Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan were still leading the way, but Han Li was only fewer than 30 steps behind them, while Zhu Han was around 100 steps behind Han Li. As for the other ghost whale sect cultivators, they had already been left so far behind that they were nothing more than tiny black dots in the distance. At this point, the gravity on the staircase had already reached an extremely formidable level, and everyone had slowed down significantly. Patriarch Cold Flame's entire body was enshrouded in a layer of bright starlight that resembled a veil, giving him a mysterious and powerful appearance. He was still leading the way from the front, and he was climbing up the steps at a roughly consistent speed. Meanwhile, Xing Shan's skin had also taken on a golden hue, in addition to the radiant golden light emanating from his body, and he resembled a golden statue that was giving off a tremendous aura of physical prowess. He was a few steps behind Patriarch Cold Flame, but he was progressing just as smoothly. Patriarch Cold Flame was rather taken aback to see this. He could tell that Xing Shan was using a very formidable body refinement secret technique. Xing Shan hadn't mastered this ability the last time they were here, so he had most likely attained this ability since the last emergence of the immortal manner specifically for this purpose. Having said that, this was no surprise as he had also made extensive preparations over the years. Patriarch Cold Flame cast his gaze even further down the staircase to find that a layer of starlight had also appeared over Han Li's body, and even though he was carrying Lu Yuqing, he wasn't showing any signs of strain at all as he continued to scale the staircase in a calm and measured fashion. As for Lu Yuqing, she had fallen completely still, and her eyes were tightly shut as if she had fallen asleep. Patriarch Cold Flame was astonished to see this, and he was only just beginning to realize that Han Li's physical prowess was far more formidable than he had imagined. Han Li seemed to have detected Patriarch Cold Flame's gaze, and as he looked up, their eyes met. Patriarch Cold Flame gave Han Li a rather forced smile, then hurriedly averted his gaze. Han Li's expression remained indifferent, as he also averted his gaze from Patriarch Cold Flame and turned his attention to the top of the silver staircase. By his estimates, there were roughly 10,000 steps on this staircase, and he still had over 3,000 steps left until he reached the top. He had only used a small portion of his physical powers at this point, so if the rate of increase of gravitational force remained consistent, then he anticipated that he would be able to reach the top of the staircase just fine. However, Han Li turned around to find that Zhu Han wasn't falling behind at all. His physical prowess was rather average, so he held no special advantage when it came to scaling this staircase, but ultimately, he was still a golden immortal. At this rate, perhaps he wouldn't be able to catch up to Han Li and the others, but he would most likely also be able to reach the top of the staircase, and once that happened, he would undoubtedly immediately lash out at them. While Han Li didn't fear him, a battle against a golden immortal was naturally something that he wanted to avoid. With that in mind, the starlight emanating from his body grew even brighter as he accelerated even further. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan were both astonished to see this, and they could only accelerate themselves in order to maintain their lead. However, it didn't take long at all before Han Li was directly behind them, and at this rate, he would even overtake them soon. Patriarch Cold Flame's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. Even though he had agreed to forge an alliance with Han Li, The Light Frost Palace was just up ahead, and he certainly wasn't going to allow Han Li to get there before him. Hence, he let loose a low roar, and the starlight radiating from his body also became significantly brighter, while his true extreme film also emerged over his skin. At the same time, his body swelled drastically in size, with his limbs in particular becoming significantly thicker, and he was able to speed up once again. Xingshan naturally wasn't willing to be left behind, and he began to chant an incantation as his skin took on a darker hue and a metallic gleam, giving him an even stronger resemblance to a golden statue. Furthermore, his stature was also dramatically enhanced, and with that came a significant increase in speed. With Han Li's trio picking up the pace in unison, Zhu Han was instantly left behind, much to his alarm and fury. His cultivation base far surpassed those of Han Li's trio, but his physical prowess wasn't remarkable in the slightest, and he hadn't prepared for this in advance, so he was already going all out just to maintain this speed. An urgent look appeared in his eyes as he watched Han Li's trio getting further and further away from him. He swept a sleeve through the air to release a streak of white light, which contained a white talisman, upon which was inscribed an image of what appeared to be a giant humanoid deity. He slapped the talisman against himself, and it instantly vanished into his body, upon which a burst of dazzling white light appeared around him. At the same time, a series of white spirit veins quickly spread over his body, and his physical prowess was significantly enhanced, thereby allowing him to remain in the race to the top. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon seeing this, and he identified the white talisman to be the giant strength spirit talisman, a powerful immortal talisman that could enhance one's physical prowess. However, he wasn't all that concerned by this. After all, a talisman like this was inevitably going to wear off soon. Around 15 minutes passed by, and at this point, everyone was only around 1,000 steps from reaching the top of the staircase. At this point, even though Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan had sped up, Han Li was still able to catch up to them, but he didn't overtake them, and the three of them were scaling the staircase alongside one another. As for Zhu Han, he was clearly beginning to struggle. The white spirit veins on his body had become quite dim, and a faint sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead, while his breathing had also become rather labored. Earlier, he had only been lagging behind by about 100 steps, but that gap had since widened to somewhere between 200 to 300 steps. Furthermore, his pace was becoming stagnant, while Han Li's trio continued to make rapid progress, and the gap between them was only continuing to widen. Ultimately, his talisman was unable to bridge the enormous disparity in physical prowess. An uncertain look appeared on Zhu Han's face as he looked up at Han Li's trio. At this rate, they were going to reach the top far ahead of him. With that in mind, he flipped a hand over to summon a palm-sized black jade box, which was giving off a warm and comforting aura, clearly indicating that the box had been crafted from some type of extremely precious material. There were several talismans plastered to the box, all of which were shimmering with spiritual light, indicating that whatever was in the box was being kept tightly under wraps. Zhu Han opened his mouth to release a burst of black light that enveloped the jade box, and all of the talismans on the box immediately flew off their own, following which the spiritual light emanating from them completely faded, indicating that they were disposable talismans. Zhu Han paid no heed to those spent talismans as he carefully opened the jade box to reveal a black pill inside that was roughly the size of a pigeon egg. The pill was giving off a burst of black light, within which a demon beast projection could be seen. The beast resembled a dragon with a lone horn on its head and a pair of wings on its back. Tremendous energy fluctuations intermingled with a hint of law power fluctuations were emanating from the black pill, and a hint of reluctance flashed through Zhu Han's eyes, but he ultimately swallowed the pill, nonetheless. Even though Han Li's trio was far ahead of Zhu Han, the black pill gave off such formidable energy fluctuations that their attention was instantly drawn to him, and a stunned look appeared on Xiang Shan's face as he exclaimed, "That's a profound beast essence pill." "What kind of pill is that, fellow Taoist Xiang?" Patriarch Cold Flame immediately asked. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly upon hearing this exchange. Thanks to the heaven-controlling vial, his cultivation advancement had relied heavily on pill consumption since his return to the immortal realm. Hence, whenever he got the opportunity, he would read through all types of books related to pill refinement. This was particularly true back when he was still in the Blaze Dragon Dao, and during his readings, he had learned about the profound beast essence pill. The pill was refined using the placentas or eggs of certain powerful beasts as the primary ingredients. These demon beasts often possessed incredibly powerful physical bodies, and taking this pill would infuse the power of the demon beast's bloodline into the body of the consumer. Not only would this drastically enhance their physical prowess, the consumer also had a chance of attaining that demon beast's innate abilities. If the primary ingredients were acquired from immortal beasts that had innate mastery over certain law powers, then there was a chance that the resulting profound beast essence pill would also be imbued with the same law powers, thereby serving the same purpose as a Tao pill. However, not only was the pill no less difficult to refine than a Tao pill, the supplementary ingredients were also very difficult to find, thereby making them exceedingly rare. This one was clearly imbued with law powers, so it was even more remarkable than the average profound beast essence pill. Xiang Shan briefly explained the effects of the profound beast essence pill to Han Li and Patriarch Cold Flame through voice transmission, and the latter's expression instantly changed drastically upon hearing this. All of a sudden, a burst of radiant black light erupted out of Zhu Han's body, and his slightly pale complexion instantly returned to normal, then turned as red as blood. At the same time, a string of cracks and pops were ringing out from within his body, as thick veins began to bulge all over the exposed parts of his body. His entire body then began to expand rapidly, reaching twice its original size in the blink of an eye, and a layer of thick black scales that was giving off a metallic sheen appeared over his skin, while sharp black claws emerged from the tips of his fingers. All of a sudden, he had transformed into a half-human, half-draconic creature. Not only that, but the muscles on his forehead and his back were squirming violently, as if something were about to emerge from those spots. However, right at this moment, the black light surging over his body subsided, and his squirming muscles also fell still. As the black faded, Zhu Han's new form was revealed in its full glory. A stunned look flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. The effects of the profound beast essence pill were comparable to that of his true spirit transformations. Attaining those transformations had been an extremely grueling task for Han Li, yet for Zhu Han, he was able to achieve the same effect just through taking a pill. Han Li looked at Zhu Han for a moment longer, then withdrew his gaze and continued to scale the staircase, and Patriarch Cold Flame and Xiang Shan hurriedly followed along. Zhu Han gently exhaled, and a sharp gust of wind shot out of his mouth, striking the stone step in front of him with an audible sound. He then looked down at his own body before heaving a faint sigh. Having taken the profound beast essence pill on such short notice, it hadn't been very efficacious at all, and most of the pill's power had been squandered, but this was already enough. Zhu Han took a step forward, climbing up 2 steps at a time as he recommenced his pursuit of Han Li's trio. Han Li and the others didn't turn around to see what was happening behind them, but they could detect Zhu Han's rapid approach with their spiritual sense, and they hurriedly picked up the pace themselves. However, in this new form, Zhu Han's speed far exceeded theirs, and it didn't take long before the gap between them was shortened to only just over 100 steps. At this rate, he would be able to catch up to them in no more than 15 minutes. Xingshan's expression darkened slightly as he chanted an incantation, and his body swelled even further in size amid a flash of golden light. At the same time, all of the hair on his head quickly vanished, and a golden monk robe also appeared over his body. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a golden arhat. Following this transformation, Xingshan was also able to scale 2 steps at a time, and he was climbing the staircase at a comparable speed to Zhu Han. A hint of surprise flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, and he also began to channel his great universe origin arts with all his might. A string of cracks and pops rang out within his body, while 18 specks of starlight appeared on his chest and abdomen, and a burst of tremendous power erupted out of his body, causing the surrounding space to tremble and quiver. Han Li continued to only take 1 step at a time, but he wasn't lagging behind Xingshan at all. As a result, Patriarch Cold Flame was instantly overtaken by the 2 of them, and an urgent look appeared in his eyes as he also began to channel his great universe origin arts with all his might, and 18 specks of starlight appeared on his chest and abdomen as well. But even though they were using the same body refinement art, it was clear that Han Li's physical prowess far surpassed Patriarch Cold Flame's. Hence, even though Patriarch Cold Flame was also able to accelerate by a large margin, he was still a little slower than Han Li, Xingshan, and Zhu Han. As a result, Zhu Han was beginning to catch up, and in his urgency to get away, Patriarch Cold Flame flipped a hand over to summon 4 or 5 talismans of different colors, all of which he plastered onto his own body in quick succession. The talismans instantly fused into body, and the starlight around him grew brighter as he sped up once again, allowing him to just barely keep up with Han Li and Xingshan. At this point, they were fewer than 200 steps from the top. The steps here had become even steeper, while the gravitational force was increasing at a far faster rate than before, thereby forcing everyone to slow down. Han Li and Xingshan were still able to make steady progress, despite being forced to decelerate, but the same couldn't be said for Patriarch Cold Flame. The starlight radiating from his body had dimmed significantly, and he was also getting short of breath, indicating that he wasn't going to be able to keep this up for much longer. Having said that, Zhu Han was also in a similar situation. Large sections of the black scales over his skin had already receded, and his face was looking a little pale, while his footsteps were also becoming rather unsteady. A look of fury and frustration appeared on Zhu Han's face. The bloodline power in the profound beast essence pill still hadn't completely fused with his body, and he wasn't going to be able to maintain this form for much longer. All of a sudden, more of the black scales on his body faded, and he was forced to stop in his tracks. Patriarch Cold Flame was ecstatic to see this, and he paused momentarily to catch his breath while also summoning a blue pill that was giving off tremendous starpor. He immediately swallowed the pill without any hesitation, then channeled his great universe origin arts to digest it, and the starlight emanating from his body instantly became significantly brighter, following which he continued to scale the staircase. A cold gleam flashed through Zhu Han's eyes, and he abruptly raised both hands before flicking his fingers through the air in rapid succession. 10 thin black threads instantly shot out of his fingertip before vanishing in a flash. In the next instant, the 10 black threads appeared behind Patriarch Cold Flame without any warning, then hurtled directly toward his back at an alarming speed. However, right at this moment, a layer of bright yellow light appeared over the silver staircase, and a burst of tremendous gravitational force began to act upon the black threads. 7 of the black threads were instantly diverted away from their original trajectories, but the remaining 3 were still hurtling directly toward Patriarch Cold Flame. Patriarch Cold Flame's expression changed drastically upon sensing this, and he let loose an alarmed cry as he dodged to the side. However, despite his best efforts, he was unable to evade the 3 black threads, which tore through the protective spiritual light around him before piercing into his body, then exploded violently. 3 massive holes were instantly blown into his body, and blood was gushing out profusely. He let loose an agonized wail as he fell to his knees, and both Han Li and Xing Shan immediately turned around upon hearing this. As for Zhu Han, he was looking rather surprised, seemingly taken aback by how easily his sneak attack had landed. However, before he had a chance to do anything else, a resounding boom suddenly rang out directly above him, and a thick bolt of reddish-purple lightning appeared out of thin air before striking him with tremendous power. His entire body was instantly inundated by radiant lightning, and a blood-curdling howl rang out before being abruptly cut off. Zhu Han's body was torn to shreds within the lightning, and his nascent soul sprang out of his destroyed remains, only to be instantly destroyed by the lightning as well. All of this had happened extremely abruptly, and Han Li was completely rooted to the spot in astonishment, but naturally also quite relieved that Zhu Han had been eliminated. "What a fool!" Xing Shan chuckled coldly, then paid no further heed to what was happening behind him as he continued to scale the staircase. It was clear that there was some type of battle prohibition restriction on the staircase. Instead of following Xing Shan, Han Li remained on the spot as he cast his gaze toward Patriarch Cold Flame, who had just suffered extremely severe injuries, but was also quite relieved to see the demise of Zhu Han. He pulled out a crimson pill in a shaky manner before swallowing it, and a layer of bright crimson light instantly appeared over his body. The 3 holes in his body quickly healed, following which he struggled to his feet. However, Han Li could tell that Patriarch Cold Flame's internal injuries were still far from healed, and it was most likely going to take some time before he could continue to scale the staircase. Thankfully, the other Ghost Whale sect cultivators were still very far behind, and that should give Patriarch Cold Flame enough time to recover. With that in mind, Han Li was just about to continue up the staircase when his expression abruptly stiffened. As the bolt of reddish-purple lightning faded, Zhu Han's severely ravaged remains were revealed. However, what had been revealed was not a body. Instead, it was a dark red wooden puppet with mysterious patterns engraved upon all of its parts. Standing not far away from the wooden puppet was none other than Zhu Han, and his face was looking a little pale, but aside from that, he was completely unharmed. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan's expressions instantly changed drastically upon hearing this. "That's a substitution puppet." Zhu Han summoned a pill that he promptly swallowed, and his pale complexion quickly recovered. "I didn't anticipate there to be a restriction like this, but no matter. There are plenty of ways to kill someone without directly attacking them," he chuckled coldly, then began to slowly ascend the staircase once again. Patriarch Cold Flame shuddered as he hurriedly tried to get away, but he had only just raised a foot when an unnatural flush appeared over his face, and he threw up a mouthful of blood before falling feebly to the ground once again. A look of despair appeared in his eyes, and in an act of desperation, he turned to Han Li as he implored through voice transmission, "Save me, fellow Taoist Han." Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he remained unmoved. It was already quite a struggle for him to carry Lu Yuqing, and if he were to accept another burden, then there was no way that he would be able to reach the top of the staircase. The final glimmer of hope in Patriarch Cold Flames faded at the sight of Han Li's expression, but in the next instant, a thought seemed to have suddenly occurred to him. "Fellow Taoist Han, do you want the second half of the Great Universe Origin Arts?" he asked in an urgent manner through voice transmission. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and suppressed his own excitement as he asked, "Do you have it?" "No, but if you save me, I can take you to it," Patriarch Cold Flame replied. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. "Are you saying that the second half of the cultivation is in this light frost palace?" "That's right. The stone slab that contains the first half of the great universe origin arts was actually something that I obtained after unintentionally triggering a restriction in the Light Frost Palace, and the main reason I came here this time is to secure the second half. That place is extremely secretive, so there's no way you'll be able to find it without me," Patriarch Cold Flame replied. Han Li didn't offer an immediate response, and a contemplative look appeared on his face as he pondered the validity of Patriarch Cold Flame's claims. Judging from the conversation between Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan from earlier, both of them seemed to have reaped significant rewards the last time they visited the Light Frost Palace, and Patriarch Cold Flame once told him that he had obtained the great universe origin arts from a secret area. So it wasn't all that far-fetched to imagine that this was the secret area he had been referring to. Furthermore, the stone slab that contained the first half of the cultivation had resonated with the starry light barrier earlier, indicating that there was definitely some connection between this place and the cultivation art. With that in mind, Patriarch Cold Flame's claims were very likely to be true. At this point, Zhu Han had already scaled around a dozen steps, and he wasn't far away from Patriarch Cold Flame. A panicked look appeared on Patriarch Cold Flame's face upon seeing this, and he hurriedly continued, "Are you suspecting that I'm lying to save myself? I'm willing to swear a vow on my life. If I'm lying to you, then let me be racked with inner demons and suffer the most painful death imaginable." Han Li finally made up his mind upon hearing this. "All right, I'll believe you this time." "Wait here for me," Han Li said as he set Lu Yuqing down onto the stone step, then began to make his way toward Patriarch Cold Flame. Lu Yuqing immediately nodded in response and did as she was told, standing still on the stone step. Descending the staircase was far easier than scaling it, and Han Li was able to reach Patriarch Cold Flame in the blink of an eye before picking him, and immediately returning the same way that he had come from. Zhu Han was furious to see this, but Han Li and Patriarch Cold Flame were still out of reach, and he didn't dare to unleash any further attacks, so he could only watch as the two of them sped away from him. Meanwhile, a hint of derision flashed through Xing Shan's eyes as he witnessed Han Li's actions. Perhaps he could carry one person to the top, but in his eyes, carrying two people was no different from committing suicide for a mere true immortal. It didn't take long before Han Li reached the same step as before, and from there, he picked up Lu Yuqing as well. With the burden of two people on his shoulders, his body instantly swayed slightly in an unsteady manner, much to the alarm of Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuqing. Han Li took a deep breath, then began to chant an incantation as a layer of dazzling purplish-golden light appeared over his body. Immediately thereafter, several true spirit projections emerged before vanishing into his body, and he instantly swelled to several times his original size, while a layer of purplish-golden scales emerged over his skin. At the same time, two additional sets of heads and arms appeared over his body. With these 6 arms, he picked up Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuqing, then began to scale the staircase once again, and compared with before, he hadn't slowed down in the slightest. An incredulous look appeared on Zhu Han's face seeing this, and his expression was mirrored by Xing Shan, who took an astonished glance at Han Li before withdrawing his gaze and continuing his ascent. "Your physical prowess is extraordinary, fellow Taoist Han. I am truly in awe," Patriarch Cold Flame praised as a hint of elation flashed through his eyes. "There's no need to flatter me, fellow Taoist Cold Flame," Han Li replied in an indifferent voice. "Also, I have a question for you." A slightly awkward look appeared on Patriarch Cold Flame's face, and he prompted, "Go ahead, fellow Taoist Han. Earlier, you referred to the person behind us as Zhu Han. We were both there at the battle of the Holy Puppet Sect. Could it be that this is the same Zhu Han from back then?" Han Li asked through voice transmission. Patriarch Cold Flame's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he was silent for a moment before nodding in confirmation. A hint of befuddlement flashed through Han Li's eyes upon hearing this. In that case, are all of those other ghost whale sect cultivators also adopting fake identities? Fellow Taoist Han, for your own sake, it's best for you to know as little about this matter as possible, Patriarch Cold Flame replied in a meaningful voice. "You're right, I was curious," Han Li replied with a smile, then asked no further questions. Meanwhile, Han Li had already scaled quite a few more steps, and he was only 30 to 40 steps from reaching the top. Zhu Han had been left far behind, while Xingshan continued to make steady progress and was about to reach the endpoint. Han Li was observing the steps up ahead with a solemn look on his face. These remaining steps were going to be the most difficult ones to conquer, and he didn't dare to take them lightly at all. Purplish golden light continued to surge over his body as he steadily progressed up the staircase, and after scaling around a dozen more steps, he finally slowed down, having to take a short break with each step that he scaled. The same was also happening to Xingshan. The gravity here was astonishingly overbearing, to the point that even the air was buzzing audibly. Han Li was looking slightly weary, and the purplish golden light emanating from his body was also flashing incessantly. Lu Yuking and Patriarch Cold Flame couldn't help but feel concerned upon seeing this. "Fellow Taoist Han, how about you put one of us down and take the other to the top, then come back and repeat the process?" Patriarch Cold Flame suggested. "That would waste too much time. Rest assured this is still not too much for me to bear," Han Li replied, and as he did so, he scaled another step. Xingshan's eyelids twitched slightly as he observed Han Li out of the corner of his eye, and he also took another step. Han Li's body was trembling slightly, and he took a deep breath as he braced himself before taking another step. The summit was already within reach, and the sooner he could reach the top, the sooner he would be able to commence his treasure hunt. With that in mind, both he and Xingshan were making one final all-out effort. The gravitational force on the final dozen or so steps was so formidable that it took the two of them a full 15 minutes to reach the top, and in the instant Han Li stepped onto the summit, the gravity instantly returned to normal, leaving him feeling as light as a feather. As a result, he inadvertently sprang up over 100 feet before landing on the ground again. Even though he had scaled the staircase as quickly as he could, he had been forced to withstand 3 times the normal gravity due to the 2 people that he was carrying, so Xingshan was able to reach the top before him. He heaved a long sigh of relief, then turned back to find that Zhu Han was still 50 to 60 steps away, glowering up at him with a furious expression. Han Li withdrew his gaze before setting down Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking, then reverted back to his normal form as he cast his gaze forward. Directly up ahead was a purple gate that was several hundred feet tall, on either side of which was a pillar with a golden dragon wound around it, and each of the golden dragons had a golden dragon bead clasped in its mouth. There was no writing on the plaque above the gate, only an artwork of an ice that was quite rough around the edges, but also somehow extremely lifelike. On either side of the gate was a tall purple wall that stretched into the distance as far as the eyes could see. Han Li took a glance at the purple gate and the walls on either side of it to find that they were completely ordinary construction that weren't giving off any spiritual power fluctuations, and the dragon beads clasped in the mouths of the 2 golden dragons were also just ordinary ornaments. The only thing that caught Han Li's attention was the artwork of the vast ice field, which resembled the ice field that they had flown through on the way here. While Han Li was inspecting the scene laid out before him, Xingshan had already arrived at the entrance, and he only stopped for a brief moment to inspect his surroundings before rushing into the palace. Han Li turned back to take a glance at the stone staircase, to find that Zhu Han and the others were still on the way up, but he wasn't far away from reaching the top. Hence, he also didn't hesitate any longer as he passed through the gate with Lu Yuqing and Patriarch Cold Flame. Upon arriving on the other side, Han Li caught sight of 3 enormous palatial buildings in the distance, all with glazed roof tiles and red painted walls, while statues of mythical beasts sat in a row atop the ridge of the roof. The 3 palaces were situated in a triangular formation, with all of their main entrances facing the gate that Han Li had just passed through. They were built upon foundations that were several feet tall, making it appear as if they had been constructed atop raised platforms. Between the gate and the palaces was a large white stone plaza that was completely empty. Han Li swept his gaze across the plaza and the palaces, and the sense of familiarity that he had been feeling grew even more pronounced. Before he had a chance to pinpoint the source of this feeling, Xingshan had already flown ahead toward the palaces. However, as soon as he leaped into the air above the plaza, the space around him suddenly began to warp and ripple, immediately following which he vanished into thin air without any warning. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he began to inspect the plaza with his bright-sight spirit eyes. Through his spirit eye ability, he was able to see a layer of white mist over the white stone plaza that he had previously been unable to see with his naked eye. There were faint spiritual power fluctuations surging throughout the white mist, and it was clear that there was an extremely profound illusory formation inside. Han Li withdrew his gaze as he turned to glance at the gate behind him once again, and all of a sudden, he was struck by a sense of realization. This is the vast glacial palace. The staircase with the gravitational restriction, the illusory formation on the plaza, the triangular formation of the palaces. This place was very similar to the vast glacial palace that he had once visited. Could it be that there was some type of connection between the 2 secret areas? Right at this moment, a heavy thud suddenly rang out from the gate behind them, and the 3 of them turned to discover that Zhu Han had reached the top of the staircase. "We have to go," Patriarch Cold Flame said in an urgent voice, then immediately flew toward the plaza, while Han Li and Lu Yuqing hurriedly followed along. The 3 of them instantly vanished into thin air right before Zhu Han burst through the gate, and he gave a cold harumph upon seeing this, but instead of charging blindly into the illusory formation, he stopped at the edge of the plaza to inspect his surroundings. While entering the illusory formation, Han Li maintained his bright-sight spirit eyes, and he clearly saw himself fall into the misty formation from above. In the next instant, the entire world spun around him, and he fell into another world. Steamed buns, warm and fluffy. Top-quality rouge, more fragrant than flowers and sweeter than honey. The sound of pedaling rang out from the surrounding area, and Han Li found himself standing on a crowded street that was extremely lively and bustling. Not far away from him stood a massive city gate, and near the foot of the gate was none other than Lu Yuqing, who was looking around with an uncertain expression. Right at this moment, Patriarch Cold Flame emerged from the city gate, then hurriedly beckoned to Lu Yuqing and Han Li. Han Li was just about to approach him when a loud voice rang out from behind him. Make way, I've got a batch of cakes fresh out of the steamer." Han Li reflexively stepped to the side upon hearing this, right as a short and stocky man quickly strode past him, carrying a pair of steamers and on either side of a carrying pole slung over his shoulder. Only after the man had passed him by did Han Li realize that he wasn't the one being spoken to. Instead, the man had been speaking to a well-dressed young master. It didn't take long before Han Li came to the realization that the three of them didn't seem to exist to the people in the illusion, and everyone was able to pass through their bodies like apparitions. However, what was most striking to him was how realistic and lifelike this illusion was, even down to the fine details like the aroma of steamed cakes and the heat coming out of the steamers. Even with his bright-sight spirit eyes, he was unable to see anything beyond the illusion presented to him. Han Li made his way over to Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking, then remarked, "This illusion is extremely convincing. Even my spirit eye ability is unable to see through it at all. This is a formation known as Infinite Worlds, and it's the most astonishing illusory formation I've ever seen, bar none. The formation is able to create entire illusory worlds, and if you don't know what you're doing, you could easily get lost in here and find yourself eternally trapped," Patriarch Cold Flame said. "I see. By the way, have any of you seen Shan?" Han Li asked. "The last time we came in here, we found ourselves on a primordial continent that was overrun by demon beasts, so that tells me that people who enter the formation at different times are presented with different illusions. He came in ahead of us, and even though it was only by a slight margin, it's very likely that he's in another illusory world. Perhaps we'll only be able to see him again after we leave this formation," Patriarch Cold Flame replied. "How did you two manage to get out of this formation the first time?" Han Li asked. "At the time, there were a total of 8 people in our group, and some of them were extremely proficient in the art of the formation. Through observing the stars at night, they were able to slowly piece together the way to exit the formation, but even so, only 4 of us, including myself and Shan, were able to leave the formation alive," Patriarch Cold Flame explained with a wry smile. Han Li took a glance up at the sky to find that it was still early in the morning, so they were far from nighttime. "Does the star observation method involve using the stars to determine the location of the bases of the formation, then using the bases of the formation to extrapolate the location of the formation's exit?" Han Li asked. "That's right," Patriarch Cold Flame replied with a slightly surprised expression. "It sounds like you're also a master in this art, fellow Taoist Han." Han Li paid no heed to his attempt at flattery as he took a glance up at the plaque above the city gate, then carefully inspected his surroundings. "The plaque here says that this is the eastern city gate, but right now, it's still early in the morning, yet the sun is in the complete opposite direction of where it should be, so one of them has to be lying. Having said that, seeing as you were able to find your way out of the formation last time thanks to the stars, it's more likely that the position of the sun is the more accurate point of reference. Hence, this should actually be the western city gate," Han Li said. An enlightened look instantly appeared in the eyes of Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking upon hearing this. "Now that we've determined our orientation, the next step is to observe the bases of the formation. My spirit eye ability is unable to see through the formation. How about yours, fellow Taoist Lu? Can you see anything?" Han Li asked. "I already gave it a try earlier, and as soon as I use my spirit eye ability, everything around me disappears, and all I can see is a boundless expanse of gray mist," Lu Yuking replied with a shake of her head. "In that case, I only have one treasure that could possibly get us out of this bind," Han Li said, then swept a sleeve through the air overhead, and a giant golden eyeball instantly appeared up above amid a flash of golden light. This golden eye wasn't actually a treasure. Instead, it was the eye of truth from his mantra-treasured axis, except he had concealed its full appearance. He hadn't done this in order to conceal the fact that he was cultivating the laws of time. Instead, he simply didn't want them to see the 360-time Tao runes on his mantra-treasured axis. After all, this cultivation art was extremely renowned in the northern glacial Immortal region, and there was a chance that Patriarch Cold Flame could have seen it before from somewhere else. As soon as the golden eye emerged, Lu Yuking and Patriarch Cold Flame immediately detected the law fluctuations emanating from it, and the latter's expression instantly changed slightly. But out of respect, both of them refrained from using their spiritual sense to examine the so-called treasure. Han Li was naturally quite pleased to see this, and he made a hand seal while closing his eyes so that he could see this space through the perspective of the Eye of Truth. As soon as he did this, the entire world around him instantly vanished, and all that remained were near-transparent spiritual power fluctuations flowing through the air. Everything was laid bare to him like the back of his hand, and after he had memorized everything that he had observed, he swept a hand through the air to withdraw the Eye of Truth. "Did you find anything, fellow Taoist Han?" Patriarch Cold Flame hurriedly asked as soon as Han Li opened his eyes. "I've managed to find all of the bases of the formation, but there could be some fake ones among them. So we'll have to rely on your memory of the direction that you took last time to find the right exit," Han Li replied. Patriarch Cold Flame was ecstatic to hear this, and he immediately replied, "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Han, I'll do everything in my power to help. If we go 3 kilometers down this street, there's an old house in an alley, and inside the yard of that house is a well, at the bottom of which is one of the bases of the formation." Han Li began to lay out the locations of the bases of the formation, while Patriarch Cold Flame listened with rapt focus, while nodding or shaking his head in response, using his recollection to determine whether these bases were genuine or false. In the real world, the white stone plaza that they were situated on wasn't very large at all, but this illusion was immeasurably massive. Starting from the well in the old house, the 3 of them passed through a wine shop and a brothel, and after a series of turns, they arrived in the backyard of a public office. After that, they stepped onto a millstone to flip over a wall that was less than 7 feet tall, arriving in a residential area in a quiet alley. After emerging from the alley, they passed through 7 or more streets before arriving at a school. During this time, Lu Yuking was gradually becoming more and more disoriented, as if she were about to lose herself in the formation, but thankfully, Han Li was able to snap her back to her senses using a spiritual sense secret technique. The tender voices of children reading aloud could be heard coming from inside the school, and outside the school gate was an elm tree that was over a century old. It wasn't very tall, but it was extremely thick, and at this moment, Han Li's trio was standing under its shadow. Last time, the exit of the formation was the remains of a primordial demon beast, and it's completely different this time, so I can't be certain, Patriarch Cold Flame said in a hesitant voice as he looked at the old elm tree. "The spiritual power fluctuations here are very different from what we've previously encountered, so I think this should be the place," Han Li said while observing the elm tree through his Eye of Truth. He then cast an incantation seal toward the elm tree, and the Eye of Truth above his head trembled slightly, then released a burst of golden ripples. The elm tree instantly brightened significantly upon contact with the golden ripples, and a blue vortex emerged within the golden light, through which a long passageway could be seen. Patriarch Cold Flame approached the blue vortex and inspected it closely for a while, then turned back to Han Li and Lu Yuking before nodding in confirmation as he said, "This should be the place. The passageway inside is almost identical as the one from last time." "All right then, let's go. We've already been delayed significantly here," Han Li said. The Eye of Truth above his head faded as he spoke, and Patriarch Cold Flame led the way into the blue vortex, followed by Lu Yuking, while Han Li brought up the rear. A few minutes later, a burst of peculiar fluctuations spread through the air above the plaza, and Han Li's trio stumbled out into the open. After taking a moment to steady himself, Patriarch Cold Flame immediately began looking around, but didn't find Cheng Shan. "Save your energy," He's a master in formations to begin with, and he's already passed through this formation once before, so he's definitely already emerged ahead of us, and he should be on his way to the palaces by now, Han Li said, then turned around to look at Plaza again with his bright-sight spirit eyes. The mist here was churning violently, and that, coupled with the chaotic spiritual power fluctuations emanating out from within, clearly indicated that Zhu Han had also made his way into the formation. Let's get out of here while Zhu Han is still trapped in the formation. Take me to where the great universe origin arts is, Han Li said to Patriarch Cold Flame. Patriarch Cold Flame nodded in response, then led the way toward the three palaces. The central palace in the triangular formation was the one that was closest to Han Li's trio, and it was significantly taller than the two behind it. In front of the palace were 10 golden pillars with countless runes inscribed upon them, and they had an extremely antiquated appearance. The main gate of the palace was over 100 feet tall and entirely constructed from gold, and it was also riddled with runes. The left half of the gate was slightly ajar, and a section of its surface was charred black. This palace is just a trap. There's nothing inside aside from 2 puppets, Patriarch Cold Flame said, then skirted around the central palace as he made his way toward the palace on the right. Was the restriction on that palace destroyed the last time you came here? Lu Yuking asked. Do you recall how I said that a total of 4 of us emerged from the illusory formation? The other 2 died in there, Patriarch Cold Flame replied. Lu Yuking's face paled slightly upon hearing this, and the 3 of them remained silent as they made their way to the palace on the right. This palace was smaller than the other one, but it was constructed using the same materials and in the same style. The only difference was that the gates of this palace were tightly shut, and the runes engraved upon it were also undamaged. Fellow Taoist Han, I found the first half of the great universe origin arts in the rear hall of this palace, and the other half is also in there, Patriarch Cold Flame said. There must be some reason why you didn't secure both halves of the cultivation art at once last time, right? Han Li asked. That's right. The cultivation art is being guarded by an early golden immortal stage puppet, Patriarch Cold Flame replied with a nod. A hint of suspicion appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. Forgive me for being blunt, but if there's a golden immortal stage puppet in there, then I don't see how it was possible for you to have stolen the first half of the cultivation art, particularly considering this was back before you cultivated the great universe origin arts. I understand your skepticism, fellow Taoist Han. At the time, it was indeed true that I wasn't even able to withstand a single attack from the puppet. Hence, I didn't engage it in a direct battle. Instead, I released a few of my puppets to divert its attention, then used a concealment treasure to mask my aura before sneaking into the rear hall, and that was how I managed to obtain the first half of the cultivation art, Patriarch Cold Flame explained. An enlightened look appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. Aside from some special puppets that possessed high levels of intelligence, like Taoist Zai, puppets were generally rather lackluster at sensing auras. So, if Patriarch Cold Flame had an aura concealment treasure, then there was indeed a chance that he could have snuck past the puppet. However, as soon as I secured the stone slab that contained the first half of the great universe origin arts, the puppet immediately detected my presence, and I was severely injured after taking just a single punch from it. Fortunately, for some reason, it didn't chase me out of the hall, and that's the only reason I managed to survive, Patriarch Cold Flame recounted with a hint of lingering fear in his eyes. What level of intelligence did the puppet possess? Han Li asked. Even though I only had a very brief clash against it, I could tell that it didn't possess much intelligence at all. Otherwise, there's no way that it would have fallen for my crude ploy at distraction, Patriarch Cold Flame replied. In that case, it most likely didn't chase you out of the hall as its former owner restricted the area that it could move around in, thereby mandating it to remain in the hall to protect the cultivation art. Hence, it should be a simple task for us to secure the second half of the cultivation art, Han Li said. Are you suggesting that we use the same ploy again? Patriarch Cold Flame asked in a rather hesitant voice. That's correct. However, I'll need your help in the execution, Han Li replied. Please tell me what you need me to do, Patriarch Cold Flame prompted. Han Li gave Patriarch Cold Flame a rundown of his plan, and after listening to what Han Li had to say, Patriarch Cold Flame nodded in response to express his approval. Lu Yuqing had also heard Han Li's plan in its entirety, and after a brief hesitation she asked, "Why have you not involved me in your plan at all, Brother Han? Is it because you think I'm too weak to be of help?" That's not the case. Our plan is to infiltrate and steal, rather than confront and rob, so the fewer the number of people we can involve, the better. On top of that, the treasure that we're going after will only benefit fellow Taoist Cold Flame and myself. So there's no reason for you to take the risk, Han Li explained. In that case, I'll just focus on staying out of your way, Lu Yuqing replied with a nod. Han Li and Patriarch Cold Flame took a pill each, then took a moment to rest before making their way up the stone steps in front of the palace. The runes on the palace gates were still completely intact, and the spiritual power fluctuations emanating from them indicated that the seal on the gates were still in operation. Han Li examined the runes momentarily to find that it wasn't a very advanced restriction, and he raised a hand to conjure up 5 balls of silver lightning, one on each fingertip, then abruptly thrust his palm toward the palace gates. A loud thump rang out, and the gates of the palace instantly swung inward. A deep indentation had appeared on the spot on the gates where Han Li's palm had struck, and the runes there had all been scorched black by the balls of silver lightning. At the center of the palace sat a copper humanoid puppet that was around 10 feet tall, and its eyes suddenly sprang open as a furious look appeared on its chiseled face as it bellowed in a thunderous voice, "All intruders must die." At the same time, its feet clanged against the ground as it rushed toward the palace gates. Han Li took a glance inside the palace, then flicked his fingers through the air several times in succession, and streaks of yellow and azure light flew out of his fingertips before transforming into 7 or 8 giant ape puppets in a flash. However, instead of attacking the copper puppet, all of the giant ape puppets split up and darted away in different directions as quickly as they could. The copper puppet immediately charged toward one of the ape puppets upon seeing this, while Han Li and Patriarch Cold Flame exchanged a glance, then immediately took advantage of this opportunity to rush into the palace. Han Li was using his transient guild mask to conceal his own aura, while Patriarch Cold Flame was achieving the same outcome through the use of a dark red robe, and they were rushing toward a giant screen at the rear of the palace. However, as soon as they stepped into the palace, a string of loud booms rang out in rapid succession, and all of the giant ape puppets that Han Li had released were wiped out in an instant. Immediately thereafter, the copper puppet stormed toward them before throwing a punch at both of them. Han Li had his guard up for such an eventuality, so he was able to react quite calmly, crossing his arms to form a barrier in the face of the oncoming fist. A resounding thump rang out, and both of his arms went numb as he slid along the ground before crashing heavily into the gate of the palace. Meanwhile, Patriarch Cold Flame had fared even worse. He seemed to have been caught completely off guard, and he tumbled through the air like a ragdoll before slamming into a wall, where he threw up a mouthful of blood. After scrambling to his feet, he immediately turned to Han Li with a stunned expression before shaking his head. It seemed that the circumstances were different from the last time he was here. There was no time for Han Li to blame Patriarch Cold Flame for feeding him false information, and he yelled, "I'll deal with this thing. You go get the second half of the cultivation art." As soon as his voice trailed off, he immediately charged directly toward the copper puppet. Han Li's original plan was for the giant ape puppets to keep the copper puppet distracted, while Patriarch Cold Flame snuck in to steal the second half of the cultivation art, and Han Li would only be required to withstand a single attack from the puppet, as Patriarch Cold Flame was getting away. After that, both of them would be able to get away, while the puppet would remain trapped in the hall. However, this was a complete deviation from the original plan, and he had no choice but to engage the puppet in a direct battle to buy time for Patriarch Cold Flame. Patriarch Cold Flame immediately did as he was told, charging directly toward the rear hall while making no further attempt to conceal his own aura. At the same time, he couldn't help but wonder how the puppet had suddenly developed such a high level of intelligence, and he was also worried that Han Li would think that he had intentionally fed him false information. If Han Li were to arrive at that conclusion, then if they could obtain the great universe origin arts, Han Li was definitely not going to be pleased. Having dealt with Han Li on multiple past occasions, Patriarch Cold Flame had developed an understanding of Han Li's character, and he knew just how unforgiving Han Li could be to those who betrayed or hurt him. "How dare you!" The copper puppet immediately swung around as soon as it sensed what Patriarch Cold Flame was doing, leaving Han Li behind to go after him. Patriarch Cold Flame had only just reached the screen when the copper puppet swung a massive fist in his direction with astounding force. He was just about to turn around to defend himself when Han Li's voice rang out from behind him. "Focus on grabbing the cultivation art. I'll take care of the puppet." After a brief hesitation, he did as he was told, ignoring the fist that was hurtling toward him from behind as he rushed toward the screen. Right as the copper puppet's fist was about to strike him in the back, a burst of lightning suddenly flashed over Han Li's body, and he flapped the thunderstorm wings on his back as he flew through the air, positioning himself between the puppet and Patriarch Cold Flame. His brows were tightly furrowed as he stacked his hands together, one on top of the other, then thrust them both upward at once. A pair of azure palm projections erupted forth, and they were also stacked on top of one another as they opposed the puppet's fist. A burst of tremendous force erupted out of its fist, causing Han Li's robes to flap audibly around him, but he remained still and unyielding. However, his arms were bent, and a large section of his legs had also sunk deep into the ground. The copper puppet was furious to see that its attack had been withstood, and a starry white cloud gathered around its fist as it lashed out at Han Li again. Han Li's fighting spirit was also ignited, and he let loose a loud roar as the muscles on his body bulged, while a layer of golden fur appeared over his body. The tips of a pair of tusks also came protruding out of his mouth, and in the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a giant mountain ape. He then threw a punch directly upward to oppose the oncoming fist of the copper puppet. The two massive fists collided violently in midair, and a burst of dazzling white light appeared between them amid a resounding thunderclap. A burst of shockwaves that were visible even to the naked eye instantly swept through the air, causing the entire palace to tremble violently. Han Li's arms bent slightly as he sank even deeper into the ground, while the copper puppet remained completely unmoved. Even after drawing upon his giant mountain ape bloodline, Han Li had still come off second best in a contest of strength against this puppet. His brows were tightly furrowed as he pulled his legs out of the ground, then sprang up into the air, taking the initiative this time to lash out with a punch against the copper puppet. In response, the puppet lunged forward and retaliated with a punch of its own. Han Li's entire body was enshrouded within a layer of dazzling blue light, and specks of dazzling starlight emerged on his chest and abdomen, while his aura also swelled drastically. Specks of starlight also emerged over the copper puppet's body, and they had appeared in the exact same spots that corresponded to the profound acupoints cultivated through the great universe origin arts. However, the puppet had opened far more profound acupoints than Han Li, so the starpore that was swirling around its fist was naturally far more formidable than Han Li's. Even before the two fists had collided, the outcome was already apparent. However, right as the two fists were about to come into contact with one another, Han Li abruptly vanished into thin air before instantly reappearing behind the copper puppet, then threw a punch straight at the puppet's back. A loud thump rang out as a vast expanse of starlight erupted out of the profound acupoints on the copper puppet's back, and it clashed violently against the starlight radiating from Han Li's fist, resulting in an eruption of blinding radiance. The copper puppet's momentum was already shifting forward as a result of the punch it had thrown, and with Han Li landing a blow on it from behind, it immediately stumbled involuntarily forward. Its enormous fist also slammed into the ground with a deafening boom as a result, and the entire palace shuddered violently as dust came raining down from the ceiling. A bottomless rift that was over 100 feet in length had been smashed into the ground, and Han Li was very thankful for his own decision not to fight fire with fire. Right before the clash was about to take place, he had reversed his mantra-treasured axis to accelerate himself, thereby allowing him to evade the copper puppet's punch. Otherwise, at the very least, he would have been missing an arm by now. What he found most surprising was that the copper puppet was also able to use starpore, and it seemed to have opened up an even higher number of profound acupoints than him. Could it be that it had also cultivated the great universe origin arts? Before Han Li had a chance to ponder this matter any further, an urgent voice suddenly rang out from the rear hall. "I've got the cultivation art, fellow Taoist Han. Let's get out of here." Immediately thereafter, Patriarch Cold Flame emerged from behind the screen, holding a gray stone slab aloft. The stone slab was riddled with countless antiquated characters, and it was clearly the second half of the great universe origin arts. Han Li immediately nodded in response, and the two of them arrived at the entrance of the palace almost at the exact same moment. Han Li raised a hand to push the palace gates open, yet right at this moment, the entire palace suddenly began to tremble violently, and all of the runes engraved upon the entire structure joined together like squirming worms, as if they had sprung to life. At the same time, a purplish golden light barrier began to spread over the walls, the ceiling, and the ground, encapsulating the entire space within the palace. An alarmed look immediately appeared on Patriarch Cold Flame's face upon seeing this. At this point, Han Li had already reverted back to his human form, and he raised a hand before thrusting his palm toward the palace gates. 5 balls of silver lightning emerged over his fingertips as he attacked the purplish golden light barrier, and a loud crackling sound rang out as countless antiquated runes emerged over the light barrier, accompanied by arcs of lightning that scattered the balls of silver lightning around Han Li's fingertips. The purplish golden lightning surged forth in a frenzy, devouring all of the scattered silver lightning, and Han Li couldn't help but draw a sharp breath as a numb sensation spread through his entire body. At this point, the copper puppet had already returned to its feet, and it declared in a cold voice, "Unforgivable." At the same time, a layer of murky white light flashed through its eyes, and the purplish golden light radiating from its body also gradually dimmed, while starlight surged out of its profound acupoints, giving its entire body a translucent appearance. In the wake of these changes, the aura that it was giving off was also elevated drastically, reaching the pinnacle of the early golden immortal stage. "I swear I didn't lie to you, fellow Taoist Han. None of this happened the last time I was here," Patriarch Cold Flame hurriedly said in an urgent voice. "I believe you," Han Li replied in a concise fashion. Patriarch Cold Flame was quite taken aback to hear this, and he was temporarily at a loss for words. The restriction outside the palace isn't even comparable to the one inside it. Don't you find that strange? Hanley asked while keeping a close eye on the copper puppet. An enlightened look instantly appeared in Patriarch Cold Flame's eyes upon seeing this. This palace was never designed to keep people out. Instead, it's to ensure that those who come in aren't able to get away. Just like the other palace, this is also a trap, and perhaps the great universe origin arts is being used as bait. After a brief moment of contemplation, Hanley speculated. Perhaps it was because too much time had passed, and some issues arose in the formation. So when you came here last time, the formation wasn't completely activated, nor had this puppet completely awakened. I presume that's how you were able to escape with your life. A hint of lingering fear welled up in Patriarch Cold Flame's heart, but at the same time, he was also very thankful for his own good fortune. Before he had a chance to reply, Hanley suddenly yelled in an urgent voice, "Here it comes." As soon as his voice trailed off, Hanley had already vanished from the spot. In the next instant, he appeared directly above the copper puppet's head, then made a peculiar hand seal before thrust a palm directly downward. A burst of ripples spread through the space beneath his palm, and a shimmering azure longsword emerged out of thin air in a flash, then flew down toward the copper puppet's head. The sound of crackling lightning rang out as a burst of piercing, golden light appeared over the azure longsword, and arcs of formidable golden lightning emerged over the entire sword before it crashed heavily down upon the top of the copper puppet's head. A resounding boom rang out as a golden lightning vortex that was several dozen feet tall appeared within the palace, and arcs of golden lightning were springing out of the vortex in all directions to strike the surrounding purplish golden light barrier. Patriarch Cold Flame was peering intently into the lightning vortex, but he was unable to see the copper puppet at all, and he could only sense the vast and violent power contained within the golden lightning. "Is it dead?" All of a sudden, a strange sound rang out from within the golden lightning vortex, and a grim look instantly appeared on Patriarch Cold Flame's face upon hearing this. Immediately thereafter, a thick and strong arm that was as fair and translucent as jade suddenly erupted upward out of the lightning vortex, then clenched through a vicious punch at the azure longsword up above. A resounding boom rang out as a white cloud of starlight erupted out of the fist with countless specks of blue light flashing within it, presenting a stunning sight that resembled a bright and starry sky. Immediately thereafter, a burst of incredibly formidable power erupted forth, and layers upon layers of white light surged outward in all directions, expanding the golden lightning vortex further and further. At the same time, the blue stars within the white light were snuffed out one after another, as a destructive aura spread emanated through the air. A thunderous roar rang out as the white light exploded once again, and the golden lightning vortex was finally torn apart, with countless arcs of golden lightning flying in all directions to strike the surrounding purplish golden light barrier. At the same time, the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords up above was also sent flying back through the air, skidding across the purplish golden light barrier on the ceiling to raise a trail of sparks before being repelled downward, where it was then caught by Hanley right before it could pierce into the ground. The azure longsword was trembling violently, and as a result, Hanley's arm was trembling slightly as well. His complexion had also paled noticeably, while his breathing had become a little ragged. His brows were tightly furrowed as he cast his gaze toward the copper puppet, upon which he discovered that it had taken on a completely different form. Its entire body had taken on the same hue and translucency as green jade, and there were specks of blue light all over its body. At this moment, there were still some faint arcs of lightning flashing over its body, but it paid no heed to this at all as it took a step forward, then abruptly sped through the air as a blurry streak of light, reaching Han Li in the blink of an eye. Instead of lashing out with a punch, it sliced its palm through the air in a chopping motion this time, lashing out at Han Li's neck with tremendous power. It was so incredibly fast that Han Li didn't have a chance to defend himself at all, and a dull thump rang out as he was sent flying into the purplish-golden light barrier in a dizzy and disoriented fashion. A vast expanse of lightning instantly erupted out of the light barrier, and Patriarch Cold Flame immediately called out to him in alarm. His first instinct was to rush to Han Li's aid, but after taking a glance at the copper puppet, he decided to remain still on the spot. However, the puppet didn't continue to pursue Han Li after striking him down. Instead, it turned to Patriarch Cold Flame with a pair of emotionless silver eyes. A chill immediately ran down Patriarch Cold Flame's spine, and he took a glance at the gray stone slab in his hand before hurriedly tossing it away as if it were a hot potato. It was unclear whether this was intentional, but the stone slab ultimately landed right beside Han Li, who had only just slammed down onto the ground after crashing into the purplish-golden light barrier. There were plumes of white smoke rising up from his entire body, and many parts of his robes were also charred black. He rose to his feet, using his azure longsword as a crutch, picking up the gray stone slab in the process, and after taking a quick glance at the stone slab, a pleased smile appeared on his face as he stowed it away. The copper puppet seemed to have been completely infuriated upon seeing this, and it immediately sped directly toward Han Li once again as a blurry streak of light. Once again, it lashed out in a chopping motion, and the white light on the palm of his hand took a serrated form as it thrust its hand directly toward Han Li's heart. This time, Han Li was already prepared, and his mantra-treasured axis instantly appeared behind him amid a flash of golden light. All of the active time Dao runes on it lit up in unison, releasing a layer of golden ripples that encompassed the area around him. As soon as the copper puppet's arm pierced into the golden ripples, it instantly became extremely slow, as if it had been thrust into quicksand. However, all of the specks of blue light on the puppet's body then suddenly grew even brighter, and all of the white radiance emanating from its body also surged toward its arm in a frenzy. The light radiating from the copper puppet's hand instantly turned from white to blue, and it also expanded to around twice its original size as it tore viciously at the surrounding golden ripples. The golden ripples released by the mantra-treasured axis were starting to become a little unstable, and the puppet's arm was beginning to travel forward again. It still wasn't very fast, but the time-slowing effect of the mantra-treasured axis was undeniably being countered, and this was something that had never happened before. "Are you still not ready, Brother Zai?" Han Li asked while struggling to support his mantra-treasured axis. "I'm ready," Brother Zai replied, and as soon as its voice trailed off, a burst of golden radiance suddenly erupted out of Han Li's body, then expanded drastically into a flood of golden lightning that filled the entire palace in the blink of an eye. It was as if the entire area had been inundated by a wave of golden lightning. Ever since entering the palace, Patriarch Cold Flame had already been astonished so many times that he was beginning to feel a little numb. At this moment, his mouth was slightly agape, and there was a dazed look in his eyes as he clung onto an azure bianjong with all his might, conjuring up an azure light barrier to protect himself. Within the vast expanse of golden lightning, a giant golden crab emerged, and its enormous shell was grinding against the purplish golden light barrier beneath the ceiling, sending lightning of two different colors erupting in all directions. A giant crab pincer shot out of the golden lightning, then snapped itself around the copper puppet's waist, and two bursts of crisscrossing golden lightning flashed past amid a rumbling thunderclap. The purplish golden light barrier around the palace was instantly torn apart before fading away, and a giant rift was also sliced into the walls and the ceiling of the palace. Immediately thereafter, all of the golden lightning within the palace gradually began to subside back into the golden crab's body, and it transformed into Taoist Zai's yellow-robed human form. Fellow Taoist Han, I'm afraid all of the immortal origin stones that you gave me earlier have been used up in that attack, Taoist Zai said as he took a glance at the copper puppet, which had been snapped into two. That's fine, I'll give you some more a bit later. You have my thanks, brother Zai, Han Li replied as he withdrew his mantra-treasured axis. There's no need to thank me. This puppet is quite formidable, and even though its intelligence was intentionally suppressed during the refinement process, it's very similar in power to a golden immortal stage profound immortal, so unless we joined forces, it wouldn't have been so easy to defeat it, Taoist Zai replied, and he alluding to Han Li that it was best to keep the remains of the puppet rather than let it go to waste. I'll be sure to take it with me. Do you have a way to repair it once we leave this place? Han Li asked. I didn't hold back at all in that attack, and I've already damaged its core, so it's hard to say whether it can be repaired or not, Taoist Zai replied in an ambiguous fashion. At this point, the copper puppet had already reverted back to its original form, and it had been snapped all the way from its left shoulder to its right oblique. A dark golden metal ball could be seen exposed in its severed abdomen, and the ball had been severed as well. A slightly forlorn look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, but he knew that it couldn't be helped. After all, this was a golden immortal stage opponent, and holding back could have easily spelled death. Taoist Zai took a glance at Patriarch Cold Flame, who was still frozen in shock, then said, If there's nothing else you need from me, then I'm going back. After that, he flew back up Han Li's sleeve as a streak of golden light, following which Han Li stowed the two halves of the copper puppet away with a sweep of his sleeve, before making his way toward the rear hall. Patriarch Cold Flame continued to stare at Han Li as he slumped to the ground, and his entire body was already drenched in cold sweat. Only now did he come to understand just how massive the gap between himself and Han Li was, and how foolish his earlier actions had been. Han Li made his way around the giant screen, where he was greeted by the sight of a hidden doorway that could fit two people through at once. He strode through the doorway to arrive in a completely isolated and windowless space, but it wasn't dark despite the lack of natural light, as a layer of luminescent stone powder had been painted over the walls, giving off a faint glow that illuminated the room. At the very center of the rear hall was a small copper platform that was only around 3 feet tall, with complex patterns engraved onto its surface. On the upper face of the platform were 2 indentations that were the exact same shape and size as the Great Universe Origin art stone slabs, and there were also runes engraved inside. Strewn across the ground behind the copper platform in a haphazard fashion were 7 or 8 black wooden chests with talismans adhered to them. It was clear that Patriarch Cold Flame hadn't been able to take what was in the chests on the previous 2 occasions that he was here. Han Li swept his gaze across his surroundings before striding forward, and a layer of azure light appeared over his hand as he swept his palm over one of the chests, upon which the talismans adhered to its surface instantly disintegrated into dust. He then opened the wooden chest, and a faint smile immediately appeared on his face as the chest's contents were revealed. Inside the chest were orderly layers of palm-sized blue crystals that totaled in excess of 100, and they were none other than Starheaven stones. With so many Starheaven stones at his disposal, cultivating the rest of the Great Universe Origin arts was going to be much easier. Han Li suppressed the excitement in his heart as he opened all of the remaining wooden chests as well, and he discovered that all of them were also filled with Starheaven stones, taking the total tally to close to 1,000. With a sweep of his sleeve, Han Li stowed all of the wooden chests away into the storage bracelet on his wrist, and only after examining the rear hall to ensure that there was nothing else left inside did he exit through the secret doorway. As he passed by the giant screen, he suddenly raised an eyebrow as he stopped in his tracks. He raised his head to look at the starry night sky depicted on the screen, and a peculiar feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. After a brief moment of contemplation, he pressed a palm against the screen and stowed it away as well. He then strode past Patriarch Cold Flame without even sparing him a glance before exiting the palace, upon which he was immediately greeted by Lu Yuking with an anxious look on her face. "Thank goodness you're finally back," Lu Yuking hurriedly said in a relieved voice. "Is something wrong?" Han Li asked as his brows furrowed slightly. "Just now, a loud commotion started over on the plaza," Lu Yuking replied as she pointed in the direction of the white stone plaza. As soon as her voice trailed off, a resounding boom rang out in that direction, following which a pillar of crimson fire erupted into the sky. "It looks like Zhu Han and the others are already breaking through the formation. We have to get out of here," Han Li said. "We've already completely diverted off our original route, and this area is outside of the map that I have. How are we going to get back?" Lu Yuking asked in a concerned voice. Han Li offered no response as he sprang up into the sky, then inspected his surroundings briefly from his new vantage point before descending back onto the ground. "At this point, we'll just have to take one step at a time and adapt with the circumstances. There are quite a few palaces and pavilions on the mountain behind these 3 palaces, and I'm sure there are some treasures waiting to be found there," Han Li said. Lu Yuking nodded in response. Right at this moment, Patriarch Cold Flame emerged from within the palace, then asked in a slightly uneasy voice, "Fellow Taoist Han, can I continue to follow you for the rest of the trip? I'm willing to let what you did earlier slide, but don't take my kindness as a sign of weakness. I think it would be best for us to split up and go our separate ways from here onward," Han Li replied in a cold voice. Right as they were speaking, another resounding boom rang out from the plaza, and 2 more pillars of light erupted into the heavens. Patriarch Cold Flame knew that he was at fault, so he made no attempt to argue as he replied, "Fellow Taoist Han, I no longer harbor any delusions of getting my hands on the second half of the great universe origin arts. All I ask is that you take me with you. If I go off on my own now, even if we set aside whether I'll be able to make it out of this secret area, I'll surely be killed if I run into Zhu Han and the others." A contemplative look appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this, and after a brief silence he replied, "All right, but I'll only take you out of this area. Once we're out of here, we go our separate ways." "Thank you, fellow Taoist Han," Patriarch Cold Flame said as he extended a respectful bow, but Han Li stepped away to sidestep the bow, then turned and departed with Lu Yuking in tow. Patriarch Cold Flame heaved a forlorn sigh as he hurriedly followed along, and the 3 of them made their way down a mountain path, which was lined with palaces and pavilions of different sizes, but they were far smaller than the previous 3. Han Li knew that the layout of this place was very similar to that of the vast glacial palace, so there was a very good chance that there would be a spirit medicine garden on the rear mountain. He was initially planning to go straight there, but he was feeling a little hesitant after inspecting the nearby buildings with his spiritual sense. Lu Yuking could tell that Han Li was rather distracted, and she asked, "What's wrong, Brother Han?" "Almost all of the buildings here have restrictions set up in them, but the quality of the restrictions vary drastically. Some are extremely crude, while others are quite advanced, indicating that there are treasures sealed inside, so it would be a real pity not to explore these buildings," Han Li mused. A hint of concern appeared in Lu Yuking's eyes upon hearing this, and she said, "Brother Han, we still have Zhu Han and the others hot on our heels, so it's fine. Even if they've found a way to break the formation, it'll still take them some time to break out. On top of that, they'll be sure to be tempted into exploring the 3 palaces back there, so they won't come after us anytime soon, Han Li said. A hint of excitement appeared in Lu Yuking's eyes upon hearing this, and she said, "All right, in that case, I suppose we could explore this area for a while." Just like everyone else who had entered the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor, Lu Yuking was also keen to secure some powerful treasures and useful resources for herself, so she was naturally enthused by the prospect of being able to do some exploring. "Let's split up and search for treasures independently, then meet back up here in an hour. If anything happens during that time, we meet back up early and get out of here," Han Li instructed. Lu Yuking gave an affirmative response, then immediately flew away in a certain direction. Meanwhile, Patriarch Cold Flame was standing off to the side with an uneasy look on his face, but he didn't dare to say anything. Han Li took a cold glance at him, then flew away in the opposite direction of Lu Yuking. Only after Han Li's departure did Patriarch Cold Flame heave a faint sigh, then flip his hand over to produce a jade slip, upon which a gleeful smile appeared on his face. This jade slip contained the second half of the Great Universe Origin arts. As it turned out, he had made this replica of the cultivation art in secret while Han Li had been locked in battle against the copper puppet, so he had obtained what he had come here for after all. With that in mind, he stowed the jade slip away, then also flew away in a certain direction. Han Li drifted down onto a small bluestone plaza in front of a 3-story pavilion. After landing on the plaza, he examined the pavilion to find that there was a small golden bell hanging from each of the 8 corners of its octagonal roof. This pavilion had to have been standing for countless years, yet the bells weren't displaying even the slightest sign of rust or discoloration. Han Li was rather intrigued to see this, and he swept a sleeve through the air to release a gentle breeze, which swept over the pavilion, causing all of the 24 bells on the pavilion's 3 roofs to sway and chime. The sound was very pleasing to the ears initially, but Han Li quickly noticed that something wasn't quite right. The chiming of the bells should have gradually subsided over time, but instead, it was only growing louder and louder, until eventually, each strike was as loud as the strike of a gong, striking Han Li with a sense of dizziness and disorientation. It seems that these 24 bells are a set of spiritually disruptive treasures. How intriguing! He had already cultivated the spirit refinement technique to the 4th level, and even he fell prey to the bell's disruptive effect for a moment, so he could only imagine how susceptible others would be. In a battle, a moment of disruption was often enough to decide the outcome, and with that in mind, Han Li was tempted to take these bells for himself. However, as he reached out to draw the bells toward him, he discovered that they were completely immovable. A puzzled look appeared on his face as he carefully examined the entire pavilion again, and only then did he realize that the entire 3-floor pavilion was a part of the set of bell treasures. Furthermore, he speculated that the bell chime sound was only the tip of the iceberg when it came to the pavilion's full power. There was most likely much worse to come inside the pavilion, and if one were to grow complacent, thinking that they had weathered the storm after withstanding the bell chime restriction, then they would be sure to suffer once they entered the pavilion. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release Taoist Zai. "Why have you summoned me again so soon? Have you encountered some trouble?" Taoist Zai asked. "I do have to trouble you for something, Brother Zai," Han Li said in a slightly apologetic voice. "Go ahead, fellow Taoist," Taoist Zai prompted. "This pavilion in front of us is a spirit treasure of an extremely high caliber, but it'll take me some time to refine it, so in the meantime, please search the nearby buildings for treasures. Regardless of what you find, I'll compensate you with immortal origin stones," Han Li said. Taoist Zai hesitated momentarily, then nodded in response. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Han Li, and he flipped a hand over to produce a yellow gourd before handing it to Taoist Zai as he said, "You can send out the Tao warriors inside to aid you in your search." "That's a good idea," Taoist Zai said as he accepted the ground from Han Li, then vanished from the spot as a flash of lightning. Meanwhile, Han Li began to focus on the task at hand, channeling his spirit refinement technique as he strode into the pavilion. This was clearly no ordinary pavilion, and its core was definitely inside. Hence, in order to refine it, the only way was to enter the pavilion itself. Around 15 minutes later, the door of the three-floor pavilion abruptly sprang open, and Han Li emerged from inside with an elated expression. He then turned around and made a hand seal, and a vast expanse of golden light suddenly emerged over the entire pavilion. There were countless runes flashing within the golden light, and all of a sudden, the pavilion shrank down to only the size of a lantern before being stowed away into Han Li's storage bracelet. This treasure is more than powerful enough to trap a mid-true immortal cultivator, and it can maybe even trap a late-true immortal cultivator who hasn't cultivated any spiritual enhancement secret techniques, but it won't work on anyone beyond that. Having said that, I can use it in conjunction with other treasures, so it can still be quite useful. Right as these thoughts were running through his mind, bursts of rumbling suddenly began to ring out in the distance, and he hurriedly turned to discover that the sound was coming from the three palaces. Clearly, Zhu Han and the others had begun invading the palaces. Right at this moment, Taoist Zai's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. "Fellow Taoist Han, come here right now." He immediately responded to the call, springing up into the air, and before long he had landed in a weed-infested courtyard. Several Tao warriors were in the process of searching for treasures in the side room of the residence, but the doors of the main room were wide open, and Taoist Zai could be seen inside. Han Li made his way into the room to find that Taoist Zai was staring at a wall in the room. "I didn't find any noteworthy treasures in here, but this mural is quite interesting," Taoist Zai said without even turning around. Han Li immediately cast his gaze toward the surrounding walls upon hearing this, and he discovered that they were covered in vibrant and colorful murals. The things drawn in the mural varied drastically, and the scenes depicted were also extremely chaotic, with severely ravaged landscapes that were overrun with lava, ferocious storms of lightning and fire, and it truly painted a doomsday-like scene. As Han Li continued to observe the mural, he felt as if the depicted scenes were beginning to move. The lava on the ground was flowing, the fireballs in the sky were beginning to descend, and lightning was flashing in the dark clouds up above. Many figures dressed in all types of attire were also flying through the air, performing all types of different actions, such as making hand seals, raising weapons, swinging fists. Aside from the battling cultivators, there were also many mountainous beasts depicted on the mural, all of which were extremely fearsome in appearance and possessed various different formidable abilities. Having dabbled in the 12 awakening transformations, Han Li knew many species of powerful ancient beasts, but he wasn't able to identify even a single one of the beasts depicted in the mural. The mural depicted an immortal battle of an enormous scale, and even though Han Li was only witnessing the battle through the mural, he felt as if he were situated directly in the battle, and a chill instantly ran down his spine. However, at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a little perplexed. All of the figures on the mural with clearly visible features seemed to belong to the same camp, yet all of their enemies had blurry facial features, as if they were enshrouded in layers of gray mist. They appeared to be cultivators, but also somehow different. "Do you know when the battle depicted on this mural took place, fellow Taoist Han?" Taoist Zai suddenly asked. Han Li shook his head in response. "I don't, do you, brother Zai?" He was thinking back to all of the historical records he had seen in the northern glacial Immortal region, but he couldn't think of any battle that corresponded with this one. I don't know either. I just thought these murals were very strange, so I wanted you to come and take a look, Taoist Zai replied with a shake of his head. Han Li had thought that he would be able to get some answers from Taoist Zai, so he was rather disappointed to hear this response, but this wasn't an important matter anyway. After that, he searched through some more buildings with Taoist Zai and gathered quite a few treasures of different calibers. There weren't many that he could use, but he could certainly sell them for a lot of immortal origin stones once he left the Immortal Manor. Once the hour was up, Han Li stowed Taoist Zai and his Tao warriors away, then returned to the same place as before. Lu Yuqing and Patriarch Cold Flame were already waiting there, and the former's eyes were sparkling with excitement, while the latter wore a neutral expression, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. After reuniting, the three of them made their way toward the Spirit Medicine Garden on the rear mountain. Before long, the three of them descended onto a plot of land, right in front of a square garden that was over 10 acres in area. The garden was surrounded by walls that were roughly 40 to 50 feet tall, constructed from some type of blue crystalline material. The material was giving off a layer of watery blue light interspersed with specks of starry light that presented a very pleasant sight to behold. Han Li swept his gaze over the walls, and a hint of surprise immediately appeared on his face. He had identified this blue crystal to be an extremely rare type of material called the heavenly crystal rock, and it could be used to refine spirit treasures. It wasn't particularly difficult to find in the outside world, but such an enormous quantity of it in one place was still a very rare sight, and using it as bricks to construct walls for a garden was a display of extreme opulence. At each corner of the walls stood a thick stone pillar that was riddled with complex formation patterns, and dazzling starlight was radiating from the pillar, forming a thick starry light barrier in the air that encompassed the entire garden. Countless star designs were flashing over the light barrier, as if they were playing out the movements of the celestial bodies in the sky, presenting a profound sight to behold. From the outside, Han Li could see that there were all types of spirit plants in the garden, and there was a faint, pleasant fragrance coming out of the garden that even the starry light barrier wasn't able to contain. An elated look appeared in Han Li's eyes, but as he took a closer look at the starry light barrier, his brows furrowed slightly in dismay. This light barrier appeared rather similar to the starry light barrier that had to be bypassed in order to enter the Light Frost Palace, but this one appeared even more profound, so it was most likely going to be even more difficult to break. This restriction is most likely going to be very difficult to break through conventional means. Having said that, the great five-elemental true light that you and fellow Taoist Xing unleashed earlier should be perfect for breaking this restriction, Han Li said as he turned to Patriarch Cold Flame. A slightly awkward look appeared on Patriarch Cold Flame's face upon hearing this, and he said, "While I do know the mantra for the great five-elemental true light, 5 extremely pure five-elemental spirit treasures are required to unleash it, and I only have spirit treasures of the fire and earth attributes, so that's not a problem. I just so happen to have a spirit treasure of each of the remaining 3 elements, and they should be at a sufficient level of purity for the task," Han Li replied as he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a trio of treasures, namely a golden ring, a green wooden sword, and a blue badge. All 3 spirit treasures were emanating astonishingly bright spiritual light, and they weren't inferior in the slightest compared with the 5 spirit treasures that were previously used. Han Li had slain countless cultivators in the immortal realm, most of whom were true immortals, so he naturally had a large collection of high-caliber spirit treasures. "You are truly a wealthy man, fellow Taoist Han. In that case, there won't be any further issues. It's just that the mantra for the great five-elemental true light is a little difficult to grasp, but I'm sure it won't be a problem for someone of your wisdom, Patriarch Cold Flame said. He flipped a hand over to produce a jade slip as he spoke, then handed it to Han Li, who accepted the jade slip before injecting his spiritual sense into it. The mantra in the jade slip wasn't very long, but just as Patriarch Cold Flame described, it was quite difficult to comprehend. Han Li quickly memorized the entire thing, then sat down on the spot and closed his eyes to mull over what he had seen. "Let's keep a lookout for Brother Han, Senior Cold Flame," Lu Yuking suggested to Patriarch Cold Flame, to which the latter nodded in response. Both of them then backed away to give Han Li some space, while scouring their surroundings for any potential hazards. Close to 2 hours passed by before Han Li abruptly opened his eyes, then rose to his feet. Both Lu Yuking and Patriarch Cold Flame immediately turned to him upon sensing this, while Han Li began to chant an incantation while pointing a finger at the 3 spirit treasures in front of him. The 3 treasures instantly rose up into the sky, with each of them releasing a ball of dazzling light, and as Han Li made a hand seal, the 3 balls of light began to come together. Patriarch Cold Flame was astonished to see this. "Have you already mastered the mantra, fellow Taoist Han?" "I once cultivated a 5-elemental ability in the past, so I was able to grasp this one a little faster than expected," Han Li explained. He was naturally referring to the divine essence-effused light. 5-elemental secret techniques were notoriously profound and difficult to master due to having to incorporate and balance 5 elements at once. But the mantra for the divine essence-effused light was rather similar to this one, and that was why it hadn't been all that difficult for him to master this mantra. "You really are full of surprises, fellow Taoist Han," Patriarch Cold Flame chuckled, seemingly already accustomed to expecting the unexpected when it came to Han Li. He didn't waste any more time with words as he flipped a hand over to produce the crimson bowl and the yellow seal before also chanting an incantation, and the pair of spirit treasures instantly flew up into the sky, while radiating dazzling spiritual light that fused with the spiritual light emanating from Han Li's trio of spirit treasures. Under the collective efforts of Han Li and Patriarch Cold Flame, countless 5-colored runes surged out of the spiritual light radiating from the 5 spirit treasures, and they began to revolve incessantly around the spirit treasures. The 5 balls of spiritual light quickly intertwined and fused together to form an enormous ball of 5-colored light, within which the 5 spirit treasures had formed a circle and were rapidly revolving. With each cycle of revolution, the 5-colored ball of light would swell slightly, and it quickly reached over 1,000 feet in size, radiating dazzling 5-colored light that illuminated the entire heavens, while Lu Yuking looked on with a dazed and awestruck expression. Right at this moment, Han Li and Patriarch Cold Flame both raised a hand in unison to cast an incantation seal toward the ball of light, and a pillar of 5-colored instantly shot out of the ball of light to strike the starry light barrier. The two fused together, and the starry light barrier remained completely unaffected, but if one were to gaze upon this scene from afar, it would appear as if there were a 5-colored passageway connected to a vast starry sky. As Han Li and Patriarch Cold Flame continued to chant the incantation for the great 5-elemental true light, the pillar of 5-colored light instantly became even brighter, and countless 5-colored arrows that were each around 10 feet in length took shape within the pillar of light before raining down upon the starry light barrier. The still surface of the starry light barrier instantly began to tremble violently, and balls of 5-colored light appeared over its surface amid a string of resounding booms. The light radiating from the starry light barrier quickly began to fade, and it was whittled down at a rapid rate, much to Han Li's surprise and suspicion. The starry light barrier appeared to be extremely profound, so why was it so inept? Despite his surprise, He continued to make a string of hand seals, and more five-colored arrows came raining down from the pillar of five-colored light. As time passed, the starry light barrier was whittled down further and further, and after only 15 minutes, only a thin layer of it was left. Hanli immediately switched to a different hand seal upon seeing this, and Patriarch Cold Flame did the same thing at almost the exact same time. The pillar of five-colored instantly brightened as all of the countless arrows within it fused as one watt form a giant arrow that was over 1,000 feet in size, with streaks of five-colored light surging all over its surface. A sharp screeching sound rang out as the giant five-colored arrow came crashing down onto the starry light barrier, and an earth-shattering boom rang out as the starry light barrier finally crumbled into countless pieces. Hanli swept a sleeve through the air upon seeing this, and the 5 spirit treasures in the sky instantly split up, with his 3 spirit treasures flying back up his sleeve, while Patriarch Cold Flame recovered his 2 spirit treasures as well. With the starry light barrier out of the way, a burst of rich spiritual chi and medicinal aroma instantly began to waft through the air. Hanli immediately flew down, followed closely by Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking. The 3 of them landed in the garden in quick succession, and as soon as they did so, balls of starlight abruptly emerged from the stone pillars situated in the 4 corners of the garden, and they released streaks of spiritual light that began to intertwine in midair. In the span of just a couple of seconds, the starry light barrier had taken shape above the garden once again, except it was only a thin layer this time. More streaks of starlight were being released out of the stone pillars to support the light barrier, and it was gradually becoming thicker and more resilient. Hanli took a glance up at the starry light barrier, and his brows furrowed slightly as if he had realized something, but he then shook his head and withdrew his gaze before turning his attention to the medicine garden around him. The garden had been split up into different sections that were separated by fences crafted from a type of green jade material, and each area was enshrouded in restrictions of different colors, with all manners of different spirit plants growing inside them. Hanli cast his gaze toward a section of the garden beside him that was several dozen feet in size. This section was enshrouded under a red restriction, with dozens of red spirit plants growing inside. The spirit plants were around 2 feet tall each, and they had ovular leaves with a bright red palm-sized flower at the top of each one, resembling a ball of scorching fire. Even through the restriction, Hanli could still detect the formidable fire attribute spiritual power fluctuations emanating from the plant. These are wild flame herbs. This was a type of renowned fire attribute spirit plant that could be used to refine some top-grade fire attribute pills and even fire attribute Tao pills, and it was extremely sought after for the fact that upon reaching 100,000 years of age, there was a very high likelihood that a hint of fire attribute law powers would emerge within the plant. There were very few spirit plants that could produce law powers on their own, and most of them had to be hundreds of thousands of years of age before reaching that stage, so the wild flame herb was very much an anomaly. The law powers produced by this plant weren't particularly formidable, but it could be used for Tao pill refinement, and the age requirement was also quite low, so it was extremely sought after among all Tao pill masters. Furthermore, judging from the size of these wild flame herbs, they had to have been at least 300,000 to 400,000 years old, so the fire attribute law powers that they harbored were naturally going to be far more formidable than in 100,000-year-old specimens. If he could mature them to 500,000 years of age with his heaven-controlling vial, then he would have a batch of priceless fire attribute spirit plants on his hands. However, instead of scrambling to pick these spirit plants, Hanli turned and made his way toward the other sections of the garden. It appeared that no one had been here for a very long time, so there had to be many spirit plants here more valuable than wild flame herbs. Meanwhile, Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking had also gone in different directions to search for spirit plants. A short while later, Hanli stopped beside a section of the garden that contained a series of thin purple spirit plants, each of which was only around half a foot tall, and they resembled wheat. These spirit plants were giving off a rather peculiar odor that was both fragrant yet also a little rank. Hanli was staring intently at these purple spirit plants, paying no heed to their peculiar aroma at all. These were Farsight weeds, and they were extremely renowned in the northern glacial Immortal region. Hanli had once read a story about an island by the name of Nightlight Island, situated in the northernmost region of the northern glacial Immortal region. There was a type of spirit hawk that resided on this island, and they only grew to an upper limit of the body integration stage. Furthermore, there weren't many of them on the island, so they never attracted much attention from anyone. That was until a true immortal stage itinerant cultivator caught a nightlight spirit hawk by chance on the island and kept it as a spirit beast. The nightlight spirit hawk's cultivation base wasn't anything special, but it possessed extraordinary eyesight, able to see things tens of thousands of kilometers away. The true immortal cultivator was ecstatic, and he earned himself quite a reputation through this bird. The story of his exploits was eventually leaked, and many cultivators flocked to the island to capture these nightlight spirit hawks, only to find that their eyesight was quite mediocre and nowhere near as extraordinary as the story proclaimed. The true immortal stage itinerant cultivator was rather surprised to hear this, and he returned to the island to investigate. Only then did he notice that there were several spirit plants growing near the nest of the nightlight spirit hawk that he had captured, and that particular hawk had only attained such exceptional eyesight after consuming this spirit plant. After word of this spread, the spirit plant in question immediately became vastly renowned and was named the Farsight weed, becoming extremely sought after for countless cultivators. However, Farsight weeds grew very slowly and only in very unique conditions, so they were very rare to begin with, and with so many cultivators going after them, they had been picked to near extinction. No specimen had appeared in the past 1,000,000 years, and Hanli certainly wasn't expecting to see any here. Furthermore, these Farsight herbs had to have been at least 200,000 to 300,000 years old, so they were undoubtedly extremely valuable. A hint of elation flashed through his eyes as he cast his gaze elsewhere, and there were extremely precious spirit plants everywhere he looked, many of which had already gone extinct in the outside world. Furthermore, all of the spirit plants in this garden were hundreds of thousands of years old, which meant that they were fit even for refining golden immortal stage pills. Aside from that, there were also several types of spirit plants in the garden that were completely unfamiliar to Hanli, even with his extensive knowledge in the field. However, all of them were brimming with spiritual power, and they were clearly extremely valuable spirit plants as well. Sure enough, the medicine garden hadn't disappointed him. Right at this moment, a burst of rumbling rang out from nearby, and Hanli turned to discover that Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking had also begun attacking some of the nearby restrictions. However, these restrictions didn't appear to be all that remarkable, but they were unexpectedly resilient, remaining intact despite the attacks they were being subjected to. Hanli immediately swept a sleeve through the air upon seeing this, and his 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords instantly flew out, then circled around in the air before transforming into an azure sword formation that encompassed several restrictions at once. Immediately thereafter, countless streaks of peerlessly sharp sword chi emerged at Hanli's behest before striking the restrictions, and they were only able to hold themselves together for a few seconds before exploding violently. With another sweep of his sleeve, Hanli released several hundred dark yellow beams, which transformed into an army of Tao warriors, and with a third sweep of his sleeve, Han Li released hundreds of jade boxes and other types of containers amid a flash of azure light. Collect all of these spirit plants, Han Li instructed. The Tao warriors immediately picked up the containers and began to work. At this point, Patriarch Cold Flame had only just broken through a restriction, and he was collecting the spirit plants inside one by one when he spotted what Han Li was doing, upon which a stunned look appeared on his face. He had already been astonished by Han Li's power, and it came as another shock to him that Han Li also had an army of Tao warriors at his disposal, considering how Tao warriors were notoriously difficult to nurture. After issuing an instruction for his Tao warriors to begin collecting the nearby spirit plants, Han Li remained still on the spot as he made a hand seal, and the azure sword formation that he had conjured up immediately flew toward another nearby section of the medicine garden. Countless streaks of azure sword chi came raining down upon the restriction, breaking through it with ease, and some of the Tao warriors immediately flocked over to that area to collect all of the spirit plants there. Right at this moment, all of the destroyed restrictions began to slowly re-emerge, indicating that they were capable of self-regeneration, just like the starry light barrier that encompassed the entire garden. Han Li was very impressed upon seeing this. The fact that these restrictions were still functional after so many years was already quite astonishing, and the fact that they were capable of self-regeneration indicated that whoever had set up the restrictions had to have been an extraordinary master in formations. With that in mind, Han Li was even more curious about who this infernal frost immortal lord was. Han Li's trio wasn't holding back in the slightest, and it didn't take them long to clear out the entire outskirts of the medicine garden. However, Han Li was naturally far more efficient than Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking, thanks to his sword formation and his army of Tao warriors, so the majority of the claimed spirit plants had fallen into his possession. During this time, he had even helped Lu Yuking break several restrictions, much to the envy and dismay of Patriarch Cold Flame. As the three of them progressed deeper into the garden, they discovered that the sections here were far larger in area than the ones before, and the restrictions were also brighter, making it impossible to see the spirit plants within from the outside. Han Li swept his gaze around the area to ensure that there weren't any abnormalities, then immediately unleashed his sword formation to attack a glowing red restriction. Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking also each chose a restriction of their own to attack, but this time, the sword formation formed by the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords wasn't able to inflict much damage onto the red restriction beneath it. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he switched to a different hand seal, upon which the azure sword formation abruptly converged toward the center to form a giant azure sword lotus flower. He then began to chant an incantation, and the sword lotus flower gradually bloomed, while arcs of dazzling lightning flashed over all of its petals as it swooped down toward the red light barrier. Every single one of the lotus flower's petals latched tightly onto the red light barrier, before revolving forcefully to tear into the restriction, and the red light barrier instantly began to warp violently. This time, it was only able to withstand the assault for a short while, before it exploded into countless specks of red light with a resounding boom. Han Li was ecstatic to see this, but his expression then instantly stiffened as he caught sight of a yellowish-brown spirit tree up ahead. Its trunk was very coarse and riddled with deep cracks, but it was giving off a vibrant sense of vitality, clearly indicating that it was no ordinary tree. However, the tree had been severed down the middle, and only a section of the trunk still remained. The cut was still quite fresh, and there were droplets of yellow sap oozing out. Han Li made his way over to the tree trunk with a contemplative look on his face. Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking were just about to go to work on some other restrictions, but all of them also stopped what they were doing and approached Han Li upon seeing this. It looks like someone got here before us. Judging from how fresh the cut looks, they shouldn't have been here any longer than a day ago, Patriarch Cold Flame surmised. Han Li nodded in response, then took a glance up at the starry light barrier overhead. It was no wonder that they had broken the restriction so easily, considering it had already been broken recently once before. The restriction was capable of self-regeneration, but too little time had passed for it to make a full recovery, and that was the only reason why they had been able to bypass it with so little trouble. Who could it be? Xingshan, Lu Yuqing murmured. No, Xingshan did get to the Light Frost Palace a little earlier than us, but there clearly wasn't enough time for him to get here and break this restriction, Han Li replied with a shake of his head. In that case, who could it be? Lu Yuqing asked. I don't know, but that person didn't touch any of the spirit plants prior to this. I don't know if those spirit plants failed to catch their eye, or if they simply didn't have enough time, but given that there are no signs of battle here, I'm assuming it was most likely the former. That leads me to believe that it was most likely a golden, immortal stage senior who passed through here before us, Han Li speculated. There were many golden immortals who had entered the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor on this occasion, and he couldn't tell exactly which one was responsible for this. Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuqing exchanged a glance upon hearing this, then discussed the matter a little longer before parting ways to continue to work on other restrictions. Meanwhile, Han Li continued to observe the severed tree trunk in front of him, and he gently dipped his finger in some of its yellow sap before taking a sniff, upon which he was immediately struck by a sense of reinvigoration. His eyes instantly lit up as he swept a sleeve through the air to release a streak of azure light, which enveloped the tree trunk before uprooting the entire thing along with the spirit soil around it. He didn't know what this tree was, but the fact that it had caught a golden immortal's eye indicated that it was definitely a very precious spirit tree. Even though the tree had been chopped down, there was still a chance for Han Li to revive it using his heaven-controlling vial. After doing all of that, Han Li flew over to another section of the medicine garden before making a hand seal, and the sword lotus flower up above instantly swooped down to encompass the bright blue light barrier down below. The thick petals of the lotus flower then began to slice against the light barrier, causing a massive commotion, and it didn't take long before the blue light barrier was destroyed to reveal what was underneath. Han Li's expression immediately darkened slightly at the sight that was laid out before him. The spirit plants in this section had already been taken as well, and this time, not even the roots had been left behind. Han Li remained still on the spot for a moment before flying over to another section, and around 15 minutes later, yet another restriction was broken under the might of the azure sword lotus flower. Once again, whatever was in this section had already been taken, and there was a hole that was several feet deep in the ground. He shook his head as he withdrew his gaze. At this point, most of the restrictions deep in the medicine garden had already been broken. Of course, Han Li was the one who had done most of the work, and all of the spirit plants here had already been taken, with no exceptions. Some of them still had their roots remaining, and Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuqing had no interest in such things, but Han Li picked up every single root that he encountered. At this moment, Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuqing were still each working on a restriction, and Han Li took a glance at the two of them before withdrawing his gaze and turning his attention to the innermost part of the medicine garden. There was a plot of land there that was over 1,000 feet in size, so it was far more massive than all of the other sections. The entire section was enshrouded under a thick purple light barrier with arcs of purple lightning flashing over its surface, and it was giving off a formidable aura, almost as if it were a massive purple beast that was laying dormant on the ground. This section was clearly different from all of the other sections, so the trio decided to leave it for last. Hanli turned his gaze toward the purple light barrier, and he was just about to call upon his azure sword Lotus Flower when a resounding boom rang out nearby. As it turned out, Lu Yuking had just broken a restriction. This restriction was more formidable than all of the prior ones, and her complexion was a little pale, indicating that she had severely taxed herself to break it. She quickly summoned a pill before swallowing it while casting her gaze forward, upon which a disappointed look appeared on her face. Whatever had been here had already been taken, with even the roots being taken, and there were only 2 huge holes left in the ground. However, whoever had come here seemed to have passed through in quite a hurry, as evidenced by the fact that there were still some thin pieces of roots left behind. Lu Yuking pouted with dismay, and she was just about to turn and depart when Han Li approached her as he said, "These appear to be the roots of some type of spirit bamboo. Bamboo is different from other plants in that it can sprout even from root fragments given the proper care, and the newly grown bamboo should be quite valuable, so it would be a waste for you to leave these roots behind." An elated look appeared on Lu Yuking's face upon hearing this, and she asked, "Do you recognize this spirit bamboo, Brother Han?" Han Li shook his head in response. "I don't, but these silver roots seem quite remarkable, so the spirit bamboo that they belong to must be very precious. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been planted so deep in the medicine garden. If you can find someone who can identify these roots, you should be able to sell them for a good price." Lu Yuking nodded eagerly in response as she swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light, which carefully dug out the silver roots in the 2 holes before storing them into a pair of jade boxes. She stowed one of the jade boxes away, then handed the other to Han Li as she said, "Thank you for your guidance, Brother Han. Otherwise, I would have passed up this entirely." Han Li made no effort to refuse, and accepted the jade box as he really was quite interested in these silver spirit bamboo roots. Meanwhile, a burst of rumbling was coming from another direction, and Patriarch Cold Flame was in the process of attacking a light blue restriction with a set of 12 flying dagger spirit treasures, all of which were spirit treasures of a very high caliber. However, this was yet another starry light barrier, and it was extremely resilient. Patriarch Cold Flame had already been attacking the light barrier for quite some time, but it was displaying no signs of breaking at all. A slightly agitated look appeared on his face as he took a glance at Han Li, and after a brief moment of contemplation, he stopped what he was doing before flying toward Han Li. Han Li was examining the silver roots in his jade box when he noticed Patriarch Cold Flame coming toward him, and he promptly stowed the jade box away. "Fellow Taoist Han, that restriction over there is rather difficult to deal with. Would you be able to give me a hand with it?" Patriarch Cold Flame asked as he cupped his fist in a salute. "Of course, fellow Taoist Cold Flame. Let's go have a look together, fellow Taoist Lu," Han Li replied with a faint smile. "Thank you, fellow Taoist Han," Patriarch Cold Flame immediately said with an elated expression. Before long, the 3 of them arrived at the starry light barrier, and Han Li began to examine it. He had actually already noticed this restriction earlier, but he could tell that it was quite a formidable restriction, so he had decided to save it for later. However, it seemed that Patriarch Cold Flame had gotten to it first. Han Li made a hand seal, and his azure sword Lotus Flower instantly descended upon the starry light barrier while revolving incessantly. Countless streaks of formidable sword chi were released from the sword Lotus Flower, raining down upon the restriction, while Patriarch Cold Flame summoned the same set of flying dagger spirit treasures as before. The 12 flying daggers then instantly swelled to over 1,000 feet in size each at his behest, and they came crashing down upon the restriction with astonishing might. The starry light barrier was extremely resilient, but it wasn't able to withstand this joint barrage from Han Li's duel for long, and it was only a short while before the light barrier was shattered to reveal what was underneath. Beneath the light barrier were around a dozen blue spirit plants, each of which was several feet tall. The stems and leaves of these spirit plants were all glittering and translucent, as if they had been fashioned out of some type of semi-transparent blue jade, and they were also giving off radiant starlight. Much to Han Li's surprise, these blue spirit plants hadn't been taken by the person who had passed through this place before them. A surprised look had also appeared on Lu Yuking's face, while Patriarch Cold Flame's expression remained unchanged, indicating that he seemed to have already anticipated this. "These are starlight herbs." A hint of elation flashed through Han Li's eyes as he identified these blue spirit plants. This was a type of renowned spirit plant that contained starpore gathered from countless nights of exposure to starlight, resulting in the accumulation of extremely pure starpore, thereby making it an exceptional ingredient for refining starpore-related pills. Judging from their size, they had to have been at least 500,000 years of age. If he could get his hands on even just one or two of these starlight herbs and refine them into pills, then that would drastically shorten the amount of time it would take for him to cultivate the second half of the great universe origin arts. Right at this moment, a streak of light suddenly flew past him, then enveloped all of the starlight herbs before uprooting them and sending them flying toward Patriarch Cold Flame. He then immediately stowed all of the starlight herbs away without any hesitation, and Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, but he didn't say anything. "Thank you for your help, fellow Taoist Han. If you require my assistance for anything, please feel free to call upon me," Patriarch Cold Flame said with a smile, making no mention of splitting the starlight herbs between them. Han Li turned to look at Patriarch Cold Flame in silence, while Lu Yuking's brows furrowed slightly as she protested, "Fellow Taoist Cold Flame, you and Brother Han work together too." Han Li raised a hand to cut her off before she could finish her sentence. Fellow Taoist Cold Flame was the one who discovered these starlight herbs first, so they naturally belonged to him. "There's no need to dwell on this matter," Han Li said in an indifferent voice, then turned and began to make his way toward the plot of land in the innermost section of the medicine garden. Lu Yuking took a cold glance at Patriarch Cold Flame, then departed behind Han Li. Patriarch Cold Flame also followed along with a gleeful look in his eyes. Having interacted with Han Li on multiple past occasions, he had developed a decent grasp of Han Li's personality and character. His original plan was for Han Li to bring up the matter of splitting the starlight herbs, in which case he would oblige, but in the process make Han Li owe him a favor so that he could continue to leverage Han Li's assistance. However, to his surprise, Han Li didn't even bother to make such a request, seemingly as he didn't want to lose face. This was even better as he could continue to exploit this personality trait of Han Li's to keep claiming more things for himself. But of course, he would do so in moderation so that he didn't turn Han Li entirely against himself. The three of them quickly arrived at the final plot of land in the medicine garden, and Han Li briefly examined the purple restriction in front of him before making a hand seal, upon which a flurry of petals of his azure sword lotus flower flew off on their own one after another, transforming into around a dozen massive translucent swords that came crashing down upon the purple light barrier. All of the giant swords were giving off extremely fearsome aura fluctuations and immense spiritual pressure that was making the nearby space tremble and quiver. The giant translucent swords struck the light barrier with immense power, but all of them were repelled one after the other. Meanwhile, the purple light barrier merely shuddered slightly before falling still again. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. The purple restriction was far more resilient than even what he had anticipated. Lu Yuking was also eager to help, and she began attacking the restriction with a series of giant azure blades of wind, while Patriarch Cold Flame was also contributing to the effort with his flying daggers. The collective barrage of attacks from the trio was quite formidable, but the purple restriction remained strong, managing to hold itself intact without much difficulty. It looks like we won't be able to break this restriction through conventional means, so let's use the great 5-elemental true light again, Hanley said as he summoned the 3 elemental spirit treasures from before, and Patriarch Cold Flame also summoned his 2 flying treasures. Moments later, a thick pillar of 5-colored light came crashing down from the heavens, releasing numerous balls of 5-colored light that rained down upon the purple light barrier. A burst of rumbling rang out incessantly, and the entire medicine garden was trembling. The purple light barrier was extremely resilient, yet even it was no match for the great 5-elemental true light, and after one barrage of attacks after another, the light barrier was quickly whittled down to just a thin layer. A sharp gleam flashed through Hanley's eyes upon seeing this, and he immediately made a hand seal, upon which the dozen or so giant translucent swords came crashing down upon the purple light barrier at his behest. Finally, the purple light barrier was unable to hold itself together any longer, and it imploded to reveal what was underneath. Hanley's trio immediately turned their attention to what had been revealed, and as it turned out, down below was a swamp that was filled with viscous dark purple mud, with the occasional purple bubble appearing on its surface, before popping with explosive force to release waves of heat coupled with bursts of purple gas. A faint layer of purple mist was hanging over the swamp, and countless tiny arcs of lightning could be seen flashing within it, giving off a fearsome aura. The dark purple mud was rather hideous in appearance, but it was imbued with extremely abundant spiritual power, indicating that it was no ordinary soil. This is lightning aura soil. In order to best nurture different types of spirit plants, Hanley had invested a great deal of time into improving his understanding of spirit soils, and at this point, he could be considered to be a master in this field. The lightning aura soil was a type of extremely precious spirit soil that was ideal for nurturing lightning attribute spirit plants, but the method to prepare it had already gone missing long ago. Hanley had tried extensively to search for this soil or its recipe in the past, all to no avail, and he certainly wasn't expecting to see some here. With a sweep of his sleeve, 2 Tao warriors instantly appeared amid a flash of golden lightning. He then summoned a pair of storage pouches that he tossed at the pair of Tao warriors as he instructed, "Collect all of this soil." The 2 Tao warriors immediately obliged, beginning to collect the spirit soil in the area, and Patriarch Cold Flame's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, as he also swept a sleeve through the air to collect some of the dark purple mud beside him. Meanwhile, Liu Yuking was looking on with slightly furrowed brows, seemingly rather disgusted by the dark purple mud. Hanley took a glance at Patriarch Cold Flame, then turned his attention to the center of the plot of land, where there was another hemispherical purple light barrier, this one far smaller than the previous one. He flew over to the light barrier, followed closely by Liu Yuking, and Patriarch Cold Flame also hurriedly followed along. This purple light barrier was identical to the one from before, except it was far smaller and nowhere near as formidable. Hanley was able to break the light barrier with his azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, without having to rely on the great 5-elemental true light, and a purple stone altar that was around 10 feet tall was revealed. The altar had been entirely constructed from a type of purple crystal, and there were lightning patterns engraved upon it, seemingly forming some type of profound formation. At the top of the stone altar was yet another purple light barrier that resembled a box that concealed the top of the altar, making it impossible to see what was inside. "How many layers of restrictions are there?" Liu Yuking couldn't help but complain. All of a sudden, Han Li noticed that there were two humanoid puppets laying on the ground beside the stone altar. The puppets were dark golden in color, and they were identical to the copper puppet that Han Li had encountered while securing the Great Universe Origin arts. However, one of the puppets had been split in half down the middle lengthwise, while the other had been decapitated, and both of them were laying on the ground in a lifeless fashion. The wounds on the puppets appeared to be quite fresh, clearly indicating that they had been inflicted not long ago. Han Li's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this. As expected, this place had already been visited as well, so whatever treasure on the stone altar had to have already been taken. The same thought had clearly also occurred to Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking, and a hint of dismay appeared on both of their faces. Han Li shook his head with a hint of disappointment in his eyes, then turned his attention back to the pair of copper puppets. In particular, his gaze lingered on the decapitated puppet as a peculiar look flashed through his eyes. In the next instant, he swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light, which swept up the pair of puppets before stowing them away. With these two puppets, particularly the decapitated one, which still had a completely intact core, Taoist Zai would surely be able to scrounge together a complete, functional puppet. Han Li had witnessed the power of these copper puppets, and they would definitely be of great assistance to him in battle. Patriarch Cold Flame's brows furrowed slightly with displeasure upon seeing this, but he quickly reverted back to a neutral expression. After gathering the puppets, Han Li flicked a finger toward the stone altar, releasing a pair of azure flying swords that swept over the purple light barrier. The restriction wasn't all that powerful, so it was torn apart with ease, revealing a wooden frame, around which was wound a long vine that still hadn't been taken, much to Han Li's surprise. However, the vine had withered away, and it seemed to have perished long ago. What kind of vine is this? It has to be something very precious to have been kept here so securely. It's just a pity that it seems to be long dead, Lu Yuking sighed. Regardless, for whatever reason, it seems like the person who came here before us was unable to take this vine, Patriarch Cold Flame said with a hint of schadenfreude in his voice. All the while, Han Li merely remained silent as his gaze roamed over the withered vine. All of a sudden, he seemed to have noticed something, and he began to inspect the vine intently with his bright-sight spirit eyes. "What is it, Brother Han?" Lu Yuking immediately asked. Instead of answering her question, Han Li flew directly toward the vine, immediately followed by Lu Yuking and Patriarch Cold Flame. After landing beside the vine, Han Li lifted up a section of it for closer inspection, and the blue light in his eyes grew even brighter. After a while, he suddenly heaved a forlorn sigh as he set down the withered vine with a disappointed look on his face. Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking were both quite perplexed to see this, and they each picked up a section of the vine for themselves for closer inspection. As it turned out, there were patterns on the vines that were rather similar to beveled silver text or golden seal text, but these patterns were more profound, as if they were the embodiment of the great Tao itself. The patterns were very faint, and they would have never been able to notice them had they not been scrutinizing the vine so closely. "These are profound heavenly patterns," Patriarch Cold Flame exclaimed. "There's no mistaking it. These patterns that are imbued with the aura of the great Tao can only be present on profound heavenly treasures. This was most likely a profound heavenly vine, but the profound heavenly treasure on it has already been taken, and the vine has wilted on its own as a result," Lu Yuking said with a wry smile. Han Li pointed at a spot on the vine, and both Patriarch Cold Flame and Lu Yuking turned their attention to that spot to find that there was a tiny incision, which wasn't very pronounced due to how withered the vine had become, but it was still distinguishable upon closer inspection. The incision had clearly been formed after something was taken off the vine. Lu Yuking heaved a faint sigh upon seeing this. Profound heavenly treasures were extremely precious and could be used to refine essential immortal treasure, yet it had slipped through their grasp. There's no point in crying over spilled milk. It looks like we're simply not in luck on this occasion, Han Li said. Right at this moment, the two Dao warriors arrived on the scene, holding a pair of bulging storage pouches, having stuffed them with virtually all of the nearby lightning aura soil. Han Li took the pair of storage pouches before stowing the two Dao warriors away. Yet before he had a chance to do anything else, the starry restriction above the medicine garden suddenly began to tremble violently as a resounding boom rang out. Han Li's trio immediately looked up at the sky with startled expressions. At this point, the starry light barrier had only recovered a tiny fraction of its power, and it quickly shattered in the face of the formidable attacks being directed at it. What a rich medicinal aura! This is definitely the medicine garden. A burst of cackling rang out overhead, and the voice belonged to none other than Zhu Han. Patriarch Cold Flame's complexion immediately paled upon hearing this, and he hurriedly made a hand seal while chanting an incantation. Immediately thereafter, he vanished into the ground beneath his feet. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he also quickly made a hand seal, upon which a faint light barrier enveloped himself and Lu Yuking's body before the two of them also vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, the destroyed starry light barrier dissipated into countless specks of light, and not long after Han Li's trio had concealed themselves, Zhu Han and the group of ghost whale sect cultivators descended onto the scene. Upon landing in the medicine garden, Zhu Han immediately began to inspect his surroundings, upon which his smile instantly stiffened. Everyone else was also rooted to the spot. There was not a single spirit plant left in the entire medicine garden. Not only had everything been completely uprooted, even the spirit soil nurturing the spirit plants that were previously here had also been taken. The entire place had been left in a state of complete chaos, and it would have been impossible to identify this place as a medicine garden had it not been for the rich medicinal aura lingering in the air. Someone got here before us. A yellow-skinned middle-aged man beside Zhu Han spat in a vengeful voice. Zhu Han was clearly enraged, and there was a look of burning fury on his face. Everyone else instantly fell silent at the sight of Zhu Han's incensed expression. After a while, Zhu Han exhaled as the fury on his face receded, and he snapped, "Don't just stand there like idiots. Go and see if there's anything left." Everyone hurriedly did as they were told, dispersing throughout the medicine garden to conduct a search. Meanwhile, Zhu Han remained still on the spot as he began to inspect the medicine garden with both his eyes and his spiritual sense. At this moment, there was a faint shadow hovering behind a large rock in a corner of the medicine garden. Within the shadow stood a pair of blurry figures, and they were none other than Han Li and Lu Yuking. There was a solemn look on Han Li's face as he chanted an incantation, while flicking his fingers through the air to release a string of incantation seals, which slowly vanished into the space around him. Zhu Han's spiritual sense swept over the two of them without pause, clearly having failed to discover their presence. Han Li's expression eased slightly upon seeing this, but he still continued to make more hand seals to ensure that they were hidden more securely. Right at this moment, Zhu Han cast his gaze toward the stone altar deep in the medicine garden, and he swept a hand through the air to release a burst of black light, which vanished into the stone altar in a flash before quickly flying back with the withered vine enveloped within it. None of the other ghost whale sect cultivators were able to find anything, and they all returned to gather around Zhu Han upon seeing this. "This is a profound heavenly vine," Zhu Han exclaimed with an astonished expression as he carefully inspected the vine. "Looking at the patterns on the vine, that's definitely a possibility. That means that the profound heavenly treasure on it had to have already been taken by the scoundrel who got here before us. The yellow-faced man cursed. This profound heavenly treasure and all of the other spirit plants here had to have been taken by Cold Flame and the others. Thankfully, this Light Frost Palace isn't a very big place, and they seem to have only come through here recently, so if we go after them now, we should be able to catch them, a tall and thin Taoist priest immediately said. A hint of elation flashed through Han Li's eyes as he eavesdropped on Zhu Han and his entourage. As soon as Zhu Han left this place, he and Lu Yuqing would be able to sneak away unnoticed. He wasn't actually all that fearful of Zhu Han. With his current powers, even if he couldn't defeat Zhu Han in battle, he would at least be able to ensure self-preservation, but it would be difficult for him to protect himself as well as Lu Yuqing, and he was quite interested in the map in her possession, so he didn't want to lose her. After hearing what everyone had to say, Zhu Han raised his head and slowly swept his gaze over the medicine garden, then suddenly made a hand seal to release a ball of black light. The ball of black light squirmed around in midair like a living creature for a while, then abruptly swelled to form a huge black net that encompassed the entire sky above the medicine garden. Han Li's expression immediately darkened slightly upon seeing this. It's possible that whoever took the spirit plants and the profound heavenly treasure haven't gone far, but it's also possible that they could still be hiding here. We can't afford to pass up any opportunity to claim the profound heavenly treasure, Zhu Han declared as a hint of yearning flashed through his eyes. If he could obtain an immortal treasure refined using a profound heavenly treasure, then his powers would be significantly enhanced, and that would allow him to leapfrog many figures currently ahead of him in the ubiquitous pavilion hierarchy. But there's no one here, the yellow-faced man said with furrowed brows. Perhaps they use some type of secret technique to conceal themselves, and we've simply been unable to detect them up to this point. Master Zhu Han is right, we can't ignore any possibility, the tall and thin Taoist priest said. That is indeed possible, the yellow-faced man mused with a contemplative expression. Zhu Han paid no heed to the discussion taking place around him as he began to chant an incantation, and a ball of silver light flew out of his body, containing a pristine white miniature pagoda that was around half a foot tall with a series of profound patterns engraved upon it. The miniature pagoda quickly swelled to in excess of the height of a grown man, and all of the patterns on its surface had lit up at once. A series of dazzling white ripples began to proliferate outward from the pagoda, and all of the surrounding world's origin chi instantly began to tremble, as if it were resonating with these white ripples. The white ripples quickly spread over the entire medicine garden, and Han Li and Lu Yuqing had also become encompassed within them. The faint light barrier around the two of them instantly began to tremble, and they were slowly being exposed. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he began to chant his incantation and make hand seals with more urgency. However, his efforts proved to be futile, and it seemed that they were inevitably going to be exposed. Right at this moment, a burst of faint light emerged from another corner of the medicine garden, then exploded with a dull thump to reveal Patriarch Cold Flame with a panicked look on his face. "I knew it was you, Cold Flame," Zhu Han said in a cold voice. Patriarch Cold Flame shuddered as a hint of despair appeared in his eyes, and he began to frantically look around as if he were searching for something. "Traitors must die. Kill him," Zhu Han declared, and all of the Ghost Whale sect cultivators instantly pounced at Patriarch Cold Flame, led by none other than the tall and thin Taoist priest and the yellow-faced man. The former swept both sleeves through the air to release balls of azure light that contained arcs of azure lightning, which hurtled directly toward Patriarch Cold Flame, while the latter instantly transformed into a pillar of crimson light. A massive ghostly projection emerged within the pillar of light, before biting down upon Patriarch Cold Flame with ferocious power, while a layer of starlight emerged over Patriarch Cold Flame's body as he fled from the scene as quickly as he could. Layman Bone Flame, Taoist clear bright, how could you? Before he had a chance to finish, he was bombarded by a string of spirit treasures. All of a sudden, a sharp gleam flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he abruptly did away with his concealment secret technique, instantly exposing himself and Lu Yuking. Immediately thereafter, he slung an arm around her waist as arcs of golden lightning began to emerge over his body, then converged above them to form a thick bolt of golden lightning that enveloped both of them and erupted into the air. Zhu Han was quite startled by this, and he hurriedly swiveled around, following which a cold smile appeared on his face. I knew you couldn't have gone very far. The huge black net above the medicine garden suddenly began to rumble violently, while also rapidly becoming around twice as thick as before. At the same time, a series of black threads shot out of all of the connective points on the net, then sped directly toward the bolt of golden lightning that was rising up into the sky. The black threads appeared to be moving in a rather languid fashion, but they were astonishingly fast, even more so than the bolt of golden lightning. The bolt of golden lightning was weaving from side to side to evade the black threads as it approached the black net up above, but it was swarmed by the vast expanse of black threads no more than 100 feet away from the net. A burst of constrictive law powers erupted out of the black threads, and the bolt of golden lightning instantly faded to reveal Han Li and Lu Yuking. The surrounding black threads didn't stop even for a moment as they continued to sweep toward the two, and they were as dense as rain, making them impossible to evade. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing this, but he remained calm and collected as he summoned his mantra-treasured axis, which began to revolve rapidly before immediately vanishing back into his body. Immediately thereafter, a layer of faint golden light emerged over his body, and he transformed into a golden blur as he continued to rush toward the black net overhead. All of a sudden, he had become extraordinarily fast, allowing him to evade the seemingly unavoidable mass of black threads with ease. All of this had transpired in the blink of an eye, and before Zhu Han had a chance to react, Han Li and Lu Yuking had already bypassed the storm of black threads and appeared directly underneath the huge black net. A hint of surprise flashed through Zhu Han's eyes upon seeing this, but he wasn't overly alarmed. Even though Han Li and Lu Yuking had managed to bypass the storm of black threads, there was no way that they would be able to get through the black net. Not only was the net imbued with restrictive law powers, it was extremely resilient, which meant that it could trap even a golden immortal, let alone a mere true immortal like Han Li. With that in mind, Zhu Han stowed away the miniature silver pagoda in his hand, then flew up toward Han Li's duo. Right at this moment, an incredibly powerful golden immortal stage aura surged out of Han Li's body, followed immediately by an eruption of thick and translucent arcs of golden lightning that were far more formidable than the golden lightning from before. At the same time, a massive crab pincer emerged from Han Li's body with thick arcs of golden lightning flashing around it, and it closed around the huge black net like a giant pair of lightning scissors. A gash was instantly torn into the net, and it wasn't a very large one, but large enough for two people to pass through. Zhu Han's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. Han Li immediately flew out of the opening as a faint shadow, then fled into the distance without any hesitation, vanishing out of sight in the blink of an eye. Right after Han Li got away, Zhu Han immediately arrived outside the black net as well, and he cast his gaze toward the direction that Han Li had fled in as he roared in a furious voice, "After him!" Ali, in a dense forest to the left of the mountain summit. A streak of golden light descended out of the sky, then faded to reveal Han Li and Lu Yuqing. "Brother Han, why are you flying away from this place?" Lu Yuqing asked with a slightly panicked expression. "We're being chased by a golden immortal. If I were on my own, perhaps I would be able to outrun him, but I can't guarantee the same if you're with me. And if we flee to the sea, there won't be anywhere that we can take cover, so it'll be very difficult to shake them off," Han Li explained while quickly scouring his surroundings. Lu Yuqing's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and she was very thankful that Han Li hadn't abandoned her. "Having said that, hiding here isn't a permanent solution either. We have to conceal our auras and hide elsewhere on the island. Do you have an aura concealment spirit treasure on you?" Han Li asked. "I do. My father gave me one before I came here," Lu Yuqing immediately replied with a nod. She then flipped a hand over to produce an extremely thin white veil garment that she promptly put on. A layer of faint white light instantly emerged over the veil garment, and it vanished out of sight, having fused into her clothes in a flash. At the same time, her aura had also become very subtle and difficult to detect. Han Li swept his spiritual sense over her momentarily, then gave a pleased nod as he said, "That'll do. Once we open up some distance between them and ourselves, we should be able to remain hidden." At the same time, he was also using his transient guild and an aura concealment secret technique to completely stifle his own aura. After that, the two of them made their way into the dense forest in the opposite direction from the medicine garden. Not long after their departure, 4 figures descended out of the sky, landing where they had been standing not long ago. "Their auras have vanished here," Layman Bone Flame said with tightly furrowed brows. "They must be hiding like cowards because they're scared of us." A burly man with a formidable physique chuckled coldly. "We have to find them. Otherwise, we'll have to face the wrath of Master Zhu Han," another ubiquitous pavilion cultivator said with a concerned expression. "No need to panic. I have something here that should be able to help us track them down," Taoist Clear Bright said with a smile. He then flipped a hand over to produce a miniature golden cauldron, on the lid of which was engraved a peculiar-looking beast with a remarkably long trunk of a nose. Its eyes were closed, and its trunk was coiled, giving it a rather adorable appearance. Taoist Clear Bright then summoned a piece of black incense before tossing it into the miniature cauldron after setting alight. After that, he chanted an incantation before laying a finger onto the head of the strange beast on the cauldron's lid, and the beast's eyelids instantly sprang open to reveal a pair of ruby-like eyes. It began sniffing around the area before turning its trunk in the direction that Han Li's duo had departed in, before releasing a cloud of dense white smoke. This spirit cauldron can sniff out the magic power, scent, aura, and many other telltale signs left behind by cultivators in the air. In particular, it's very sensitive to the bodily aroma of women. However, it won't work if too much time has passed, so we have to get after them right away, Taoist Clear Bright said. The other 3 ubiquitous pavilion cultivators were ecstatic to see this, and they hurriedly set off in the direction that the cloud of smoke was pointing in. Meanwhile, Han Li and Lu Yuqing had arrived in a dilapidated garden. All of the pavilions and buildings had already collapsed, and there were layers of slick moss and masses of tangled vines clinging to everything. The garden wasn't very large, and it had been constructed on the outskirts of the forest, which meant that leaving the garden equated to emerging from the forest. The exit of the garden was a semi-collapsed circular archway, outside of which was a small winding path that was covered in weeds leading all the way down the mountain. "Someone's coming after us," Han Li suddenly said as he stopped in his tracks and turned around. "How, we've already concealed our auras," Lu Yuqing exclaimed with a surprised expression. "We may have concealed our auras, but that doesn't mean that they don't have other ways to track us. If worse comes to worst, we'll have to try and get away." Before Han Li finished his sentence, his voice suddenly cut off as a surprised look appeared on his face. "What is it, Brother Han?" Lu Yuqing asked with a slightly anxious expression. Han Li offered no response as he hurried over to the semi-collapsed stone archway before carefully examining it. Lu Yuqing also followed along and began to inspect the archway with tightly furrowed brows, and each of them were using their respective ocular ability. Moments later, Lu Yuqing withdrew her gaze as she asked in a puzzled manner, "Is there something special about this archway, Brother Han?" Han Li shook his head in response. "Do you not see anything either? Looks like it must have been my imagination then. Let's go." With that, the two of them stepped through the stone archway. But as soon as they did so, the space around them instantly began to warp like a sheet of paper that had suddenly been poked inward, resulting in layers of creases. Han Li was quite startled to see this, but it was too late for him to backtrack, and he stumbled forward before steadying himself. Lu Yuqing also tipped forward involuntarily, and she would have fallen on her face had Han Li not reacted sufficiently quickly to catch her. Upon witnessing the scene that laid out before her, Lu Yuqing immediately exclaimed, "Where are we right now?" A thin and long mountain range that stretched for hundreds of kilometers had appeared in front of them, and it seemed that the mountain range was connected to the island that they were currently on. Han Li turned back to discover that the stone archway was still there, but it seemed very out of place in this setting. "It looks like this archway is the entrance to another area," Han Li mused. "That's incredible. Neither of us detected any spatial fluctuations before we stepped through the archway," Lu Yuqing said with an amazed expression. "I have a feeling that perhaps this is a one-way passageway, and the triggering mechanism is on this side, so it was previously only possible to go from here to the garden. However, it seems like it's since become a two-way passageway, perhaps due to the damage to the archway," Han Li speculated. Lu Yuqing immediately began to inspect the archway upon hearing this, and sure enough, there were indeed some faint spatial fluctuations emanating from it. "Now that we're in this hidden space, it should be very difficult for them to find us," Lu Yuqing said. "Even so, we can't get complacent. After all, they managed to track us down earlier, did they not?" Lu Yuqing fell silent upon hearing this. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li suddenly swept a sleeve through the air to release a streak of golden light, which transformed into Taoist Zai. Taoist Zai took a glance at Lu Yuqing, then said to Han Li through voice transmission, "Fellow Taoist Han, while it's true that you're my current owner, haven't you been summoning me a bit too frequently these past few days? My apologies, but we're in a very perilous situation right now, so I have no choice but to call upon you," Han Li replied with a wry smile as he flipped a hand over to produce a storage pouch. "Here are some immortal origin stones in case I need to call upon you for battle. Will that be enough?" Taoist Zai accepted the storage pouch, then inspected its contents briefly before replying, "That should be enough unless I'm required to use certain special secret techniques." "Good. In that case, you can go back and rest. The next time I summon you will most likely be in the heat of battle," Han Li said with a nod. Taoist Zai flew back up Han Li's sleeve as a streak of golden light upon hearing this. Lu Yuqing was watching in silence, and she was rather curious about Taoist Zai's identity, but knew not to ask unnecessary questions. "Let's try and figure out what this place is before we do anything else," Han Li said as he inspected the mountain range with his eyes and his spiritual sense. Moments later, he withdrew his spiritual sense, and his brows furrowed slightly as he said, "This place is rather strange. It seems to be an independent space. Whenever I try to release my spiritual sense beyond the boundaries of the mountain range, it hits an invisible wall." "Then what should we do now? Should we explore the mountain range?" Lu Yuqing asked. Han Li pondered the question for a moment, then replied, "If this is an isolated area, then there's definitely going to be more than one entrance and exit, so let's go and search the mountain range. Perhaps we'll be able to find a way out. Lu Yuqing naturally raised no objections to this, and the two of them immediately set off, flying deep into the mountain range as two streaks of light. Only while in midair did Han Li discover that the mountain range wasn't actually in the shape of a straight line. Instead, it split apart down the middle at some point to produce two different branches. "Which way should we go, Brother Han?" Lu Yuqing asked as she looked at the crossroads down below. Han Li released his spiritual sense once again to try and detect something, but the results were rather dissatisfactory. "I can't tell any difference between the two branches at the moment, so we'll just have to explore them one by one and—" Before Han Li had a chance to finish his sentence, he suddenly discovered that the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords in his body had become rather restless for no apparent reason, and they were expressing some type of emotion to him through their spiritual connection. It was a mixture of excitement, surprise, and agitation. Han Li immediately flipped a hand over to summon one of his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, and it instantly shot forth toward the right branch of the mountain range. If Han Li hadn't forced it to a halt through their spiritual connection, the sword would have flown away without him. "For some reason, my bonded flying sword seems to be attracted to that branch of the mountain range," Han Li said as he caught the flying sword in his grasp. "That must mean that there's something noteworthy there. We don't know which branch to choose anyway, so why don't we let the sword decide for us?" Lu Yuqing suggested with a smile. Han Li considered this proposal momentarily, then nodded in response. Thus, the two of them flew toward the right branch of the mountain range, but upon arriving at the point where the two branches intersected, Han Li suddenly stopped in his tracks, then cast his gaze in the direction of the stone archway as he asked, "Can I have a piece of fabric from your dress, fellow Taoist Lu?" Lu Yuqing was rather puzzled by this request, but she duly obliged, lifting the skirt of her dress before tearing off a piece and handing it to Han Li. After accepting the piece of fabric from her, Han Li summoned a pair of giant ape puppets, then tied the strip of fabric around the finger of one of the puppets. After that, he injected a wisp of his spiritual sense into the body of the other puppet, then instructed them to fly toward the left branch of the mountain range. Lu Yuqing's eyes immediately lit up upon seeing this, and she praised, "That's so smart of you, Brother Han. Even if those people manage to track us up to this point, they'll surely be fooled. If we're lucky and they really do end up going the wrong way, regardless of whether they trigger any restrictions or engage my puppets in battle, as long as they make some noise, we'll be alerted to their presence in advance," Han Li said. Lu Yuqing nodded in response, and at the same time, she couldn't help but wonder exactly what Han Li had to have gone through to make him so vigilant and resourceful. "All right, let's go," Han Li said, then flew toward the right branch of the mountain range, and Lu Yuqing hurriedly followed along. The two of them had only just arrived above that branch of the mountain range when the azure bamboo cloud swarm sword in Han Li's hand suddenly began to tremble violently, and it flew down with tremendous force, dragging Han Li downward. At the same time, a burst of azure light suddenly appeared within Han Li's sleeve, and immediately thereafter, his sleeve abruptly burst open as one azure flying sword emerged after another, all of which were desperately trying to fly down as quickly as they could. Han Li was quite startled by this turn of events, and he hurriedly closed his sleeve to prevent the rest of the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords from flying out. At the same time, he tried to summon the dozens of flying swords that had already flown away back to himself, but they refused to heed his call, and it was as if they had gone completely out of his control. Han Li took a deep breath, then flew down after his flying swords, while Lu Yuqing also followed along without much hesitation. Upon landing on the ground, Han Li was alarmed to discover that his spiritual connection with the azure cloud swarm bamboo swords that had already flown away had suddenly been severed, so he was unable to sense them at all. He forcibly suppressed the agitation that was rising up in his heart as he inspected his surroundings, and he found himself standing in an abandoned garden that was overrun with weeds and shrubs. There seemed to be a small brick path beneath his feet, but it was barely visible at all underneath all of the soil and dead leaves and branches. Han Li wore a grim expression as he scoured the surroundings with his spiritual sense, but to no avail. At the same time, all of his remaining flying swords were still desperately trying to fly out of his sleeve. Han Li took a glance down at his own bulging sleeve, then suddenly let go, releasing the flying sword in his grasp. The flying sword instantly flew out of his grasp before hurtling deeper into the garden in a flash. Han Li immediately focused his gaze intently on the flying sword as he set off in pursuit. The flying sword flew straight to the deepest part of the garden, then plunged itself completely into a black tombstone that was around half the height of a grown man. The black tombstone had clearly been weathered by the passage of time, and aside from a layer of dark and slick moss on its surface, there wasn't any text inscribed upon it. Behind the tombstone was a bulging mound that appeared to be no different from an ordinary grave. Han Li swept his gaze over the black tombstone with his bright-sight spirit eyes, and he was immediately greeted by the sight of a burst of spatial ripples that were invisible to the naked eye. His brows furrowed slightly as he approached the tombstone, then laid a hand down upon it, and a layer of black light instantly surged over the tombstone, then flashed a few times before fading away. Han Li's brows were tightly furrowed as he pressed down on different parts of the tombstone with the palm of his hand, but it displayed no reaction other than that brief flash of black light. At this point, Lu Yuqing had also arrived on the scene, and she landed beside Han Li before turning her attention to the tombstone, upon which a hint of recognition flashed through her eyes. "Do you recognize this thing?" Han Li asked. "If I'm not mistaken, this should be a realm-traversing plaque. We have one in the island Master's Manor," Lu Yuqing replied. "Realm-traversing plaque, what's that?" Han Li asked. "It's a type of spatial treasure that's similar to a teleportation formation, except it only facilitates one-way teleportation," Lu Yuqing explained. "Do you know of any way to activate this plaque?" Han Li hurriedly asked. "I can give it a try," Lu Yuqing replied, then strode forward as she flipped a hand over to summon an octagonal black jade pendant, upon which were engraved some very strange spiral patterns that were layered on top of one another in a rather convoluted fashion. "This is the key for the realm-traversing plaque at our island Master's Manor. Apparently, it was passed down in our clan from generations past along with the realm-traversing plaque, but I don't know if this key will actually work on this plaque as well," Lu Yuqing said as she cast an incantation seal onto the jade pendant. A streak of azure light flew into the pendant, following which the spiral patterns on its surface instantly began to revolve, and it released a streak of black light onto the realm-traversing plaque. A spiral pattern also appeared on the realm-traversing plaque, and it warped and twisted momentarily before transforming into a palm-sized black vortex. The vortex was constantly fluctuating in size, as if there were two conflicting forces trying to expand and contract it in unison. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. Right at this moment, Lu Yuqing suddenly said, "Brother Han, it looks like this key of mine isn't a perfect match with this realm-traversing plaque, so I'll need you to inject more immortal spiritual power into it to support me." Han Li immediately laid a hand upon Lu Yuqing's jade pendant upon hearing this, and his immense immortal spiritual power surged out of his body before injecting itself into the jade pendant. The pillar of black light shooting out of the jade pendant instantly became thicker, causing layers upon layers of rippling black light to emerge over the entire plaque. At the same time, the palm-sized vortex at the center of the plaque seemed to have overcome the mysterious force that was trying to suppress it, and it was steadily expanding. An elated look appeared in both Lu Yuking and Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. The black vortex on the realm-traversing plaque began to revolve faster and faster, and a burst of tremendous suction force erupted out of it, instantly pulling in Han Li and Lu Yuking. Han Li felt the entire world spin around him, and his vision abruptly faded before quickly returning again. However, before he had a chance to steady himself and inspect his surroundings, the remaining flying swords erupted into a frenzy once again. This time, he didn't even get a chance to stop them before all of them burst out of his sleeve, then shot up into the sky like dozens of rising azure dragons, vanishing into the clouds up above in the blink of an eye. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face as he took a glance down at his own empty sleeve, then swept his gaze over his surroundings. Directly in front of him stood an enormous mountain that reached all the way up into the clouds. The mountain was covered in dense vegetation, and it was thriving with vitality, in stark contrast with the environment from before. Everything here was completely different from the earlier setting, to the point that Han Li was even beginning to suspect that he had fallen into an illusion. However, after inspecting the area with his bright-sight spirit eyes and his eye of truth, he confirmed that this was, in fact, the real world. Right as he was looking around with a perplexed expression, Lu Yuking stumbled out of the space beside him. She was also quite befuddled by what she was seeing, and she couldn't help but ask, "Have already entered the realm-traversing plaque, Brother Han?" "I presume so. This place is a little strange. Right now, all of my bonded flying swords have flown onto that mountain," Han Li replied as he pointed at the mountain summit up ahead. Han Li was feeling a little agitated from having his spiritual connection with his azure bamboo cloudswarm sword severed. But now that he had entered the realm-traversing plaque, the spiritual connection had been restored, and he was feeling a lot more reassured. Those ubiquitous pavilion cultivators shouldn't be able to come after us now. If your swords are on that mountain, then let's retrieve them and meet back up with our fellow Taoists from the True Flame sect as soon as possible, Lu Yuking said. Han Li nodded in response, then swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of azure light that enveloped both himself and Lu Yuking before rising up into the sky. However, he had only risen to an altitude of no more than 1,000 feet when the sky above him suddenly took on a completely different complexion, and a burst of invisible pressure came crashing down without any warning. Immediately thereafter, the clouds up above descended a little, and a burst of incredibly formidable sword chi surged down from the heavens. Countless streaks of semi-transparent sword light swooped down from above with unstoppable might, and Lu Yuking's face instantly turned deathly pale upon seeing this. Han Li was hovering in midair, and specks of blue light emerged over his body as he threw a punch at the vast expanse of sword light in the sky. A burst of invisible force erupted out of his fist, hurtling directly upward, and a resounding boom rang out as the entire sky trembled violently, while a string of audible cracks rang out, as if the very space itself had been shattered. All of the streaks of sword light were instantly slowed down in their descent, and countless streaks of sword light were destroyed altogether, exploding into innumerable translucent shards that erupted in all directions to create a huge opening. Han Li immediately flew toward the opening upon seeing this, but before he had a chance to reach it, the clouds up above descended even further, and a layer of shiny sword light emerged to fill the hole that Han Li was trying to exploit. His brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this as a thrust a palm upward, and a burst of black light instantly shot out of his hand, then transformed into his heavy water true axis before hurtling directly upward. With the infusion of second-level heavy water, The heavy water true axis had become incredibly formidable, and the water Dao runes on its surface were radiating dazzling black light, making it resemble a black sun. At the same time, it was revolving rapidly like a giant black millstone, pulverizing all of the streaks of sword light that were descending upon it. However, as more layers of sword light were destroyed, the clouds up above descended further and further. The sword light in the sky was becoming denser and denser as a result, and the pressure in the air had become so severe that Han Li felt as if the surrounding space had become slightly warped. At this point, Han Li had arrived at the conclusion that if he were to go all out and resist the sword light descending from the heavens without any regard for consequences, then perhaps he would be able to force his way through thanks to his treasures and his profound immortal physique. But doing so while avoiding injury was far from a sure thing. There were potentially many more perilous situations that he was going to have to face in the infernal frost immortal manner, so he wasn't willing to take the risk. Thus, he descended back down to the ground as he said to Lu Yuqing, "The sword chi here is too vast for me to oppose, so we have no choice but to scale the mountain by foot." "That's fine. At our speed, it shouldn't take us long to get to the top even on foot," Lu Yuqing replied with a nod. With that, the two of them set off toward the foot of the mountain, along the stone path beneath their feet. After Han Li returned to the ground, the clouds that were bearing down from above slowly returned to their original altitude, and Han Li and Lu Yuqing didn't encounter any further obstructions as they continued their journey on foot. Upon arriving at the foot of the mountain, the two of them were greeted by the sight of a tall stone archway, upon which was a massive plaque that bore some golden seal text characters. Boundless Sword Sect. The strokes of the characters were strong and forceful, but also full of casual flair. They were as sharp as a sword, yet also wild and unrestrained, unlike the straight edge of a blade. As soon as Han Li's gaze fell upon the plaque, he was immediately struck by a burst of tremendous sword intent, and he reflexively stumbled back a few steps with a surprised look on his face. The Boundless Sword Sect had always been shrouded in mystery, and it had suddenly disappeared over 1,000,000 years ago. Never had Han Li anticipated that he would discover it here. As these thoughts were running through his mind, he took a glance at Lu Yuqing, only to find that she wasn't displaying any special reaction. Perhaps it was because she was unable to sense the sword intent imbued within the plaque due to her lack of affinity for the way of the sword. Could there be some kind of sword restraining formation that drew in my azure bamboo cloudswarm swords? After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li strode through the stone archway with Lu Yuqing, and they continued their way up the mountain. The ancient mountain path snaked up the mountain in circles like a spiraling staircase, and as Han Li and Lu Yuqing scaled the mountain, they encountered many mountains that were concealed within the undergrowth. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that all of them were ordinary buildings that weren't being protected by any formations or restrictions, and most of them had already become extremely dilapidated with age. The closer they drew to the mountain summit, the peaceful the surrounding environment became, and there was a forbidding atmosphere in the air, a notion that certainly wasn't helped by the complete lack of birds and beasts in the forest. As they were passing through a green bamboo forest, Han Li suddenly stopped in his tracks as he spotted a dark green bamboo cabin deep within the forest. After a brief moment of hesitation, he diverged from the stone path and made his way into the bamboo forest. Lu Yuqing was rather curious about why Han Li had suddenly changed directions, but she remained silent and trailed along behind him. Not long after making his way into the forest, he noticed some strange signs. For example, there were many sword marks on the bamboo trees that he was passing by, and the marks were all quite dark, clearly indicating that they had been inflicted many years ago. Moments later, he stopped in his tracks, then grabbed onto a thick bamboo tree beside him before tightening his grip around it. The bamboo tree immediately began to creak and groan, but it didn't shatter right away. Han Li was rather taken aback to see this, and he tightened his grip even further. Finally, the bamboo tree exploded, sending countless pieces of shrapnel that were as hard as steel flying in all directions. "What kind of bamboo is this? It's so resilient," Lu Yuking asked with a surprised expression. "It should be a type of purple essence bamboo, one of the hardest types of trees in existence," Han Li replied. He continued onward while speaking, making his way up the steps in front of the bamboo cabin before stepping through the entrance. The cabin was barely furnished, with only a woven bamboo 8 Immortals table coupled with 4 long benches in the outer room, and 7 bamboo beds in the inner room. "These beds are so small and narrow. It feels like they're meant for children," Lu Yuking mused with slightly furrowed brows. It said that the Boundless sword sect was extremely strict in its recruitment of disciples. There was never any large intake of disciples. Instead, existing disciples were sent out to search for children with supreme swordsmanship attitude, and these children were nurtured from a young age. This is most likely some of those disciples stayed in their youth, Han Li speculated. "I see. I've read some records about this sect by chance in an ancient scripture. And I recall that the sect had extremely few members, all of whom very rarely left the sect, so it was a very mysterious entity, but I don't know any more beyond that," Lu Yuking said. "If disciples of this sect wanted to leave as sect disciples, then they had to reach the golden immortal stage first. Otherwise, they would have to stay in the sect until the day they died. During its heyday, there was once a story about the sect having 7 golden immortals traveling the world together, but not many people know of this story nowadays," Han Li said. "How do you know about this, Brother Han?" Lu Yuking asked with a curious expression. "Technically, I'm a swordsman myself, so I keep an eye out for things like this in my reading. There are many more legends surrounding the Boundless sword sect, and the most renowned one pertains to the Boundless sword sea and its inner sect," Han Li continued. "What's that?" Lu Yuking asked with an intrigued expression. Han Li began to make his way out of the bamboo cabin as he explained. It said that the founder of the Boundless sword sect, the Boundless Taoist, had a hobby of collecting swords. Regardless of whether it's a battle of life and death or just a casual spar, he would always take the flying swords of the opponents that he defeated to be kept in the sect's sword pond. All of the disciples that he took under his wing adopted the same tradition as well, and whenever they left the sect to explore the world, they would search for swords to bring back to the sect, and over time, the Boundless sword pond turned into the Boundless sword sea. After emerging from the bamboo forest, the two of them continued up the winding mountain path, arriving at a stone staircase that extended all the way up into the clouds halfway up the mountain. To the left of the stone staircase stood a giant black rock, upon which were inscribed the words "Sword Resolution Stone" in antiquated characters. Han Li strode over to the giant rock, and upon close inspection, he discovered that there were 2 small lines of white text beneath the words "Sword Resolution Stone." "True immortals shall not take flight here. All swords of this world must bow their heads." Every single character was giving off an indescribable aura of sharpness, as if each and every stroke was comprised of a streak of sword chi. It was clear that the inscription had been made by the same person as the one who had made the Boundless sword sect inscription on the plaque at the entrance. "I can understand the first line alluding to how even true immortals are unable to fly here, but what does the second line mean?" Lu Yuking murmured to herself. "The Boundless sword sea of the Boundless sword sect contains countless swords, and there's no larger collection of swords in this world. That's most likely what it means for all swords to have to bow their heads. However, what I'm struggling to understand is what this sword resolution stone is supposed to be," Han Li mused. As soon as his voice trailed off, a burst of thunderous rumbling suddenly rang out from the cloud above, and a burst of golden light emerged before spreading in all directions. Han Li immediately looked to see what was happening overhead, while Lu Yuqing hurriedly asked, "What's happening, Brother Han?" "Some type of restriction seems to have been activated above the clouds. My spiritual connection with my bonded flying swords have been severed again," Han Li replied with tightly furrowed brows. Immediately thereafter, he turned and strode onto the first stone step before launching himself diagonally upward, scaling several hundred steps with just a single leap. Lu Yuqing immediately followed along in the same fashion, and the closer they drew to the mountain summit, the more humid the air became. By the time they had reached an altitude of several thousand feet, they found themselves enshrouded in a cloud of misty water vapor. As they traversed through the sea of mist, their visibility was severely hampered, and their spiritual sense was also significantly restricted. "Something's not right with this mist. I can't see through it with my spirit eye ability, so be careful," Han Li cautioned as he conjured up a layer of protective spiritual light over his body and accelerated up the staircase. Lu Yuqing was following along close on his heels with her ocular ability activated, and all of a sudden she yelled, "Look out, Brother Han!" As soon as her voice trailed off, two streaks of golden sword light came flying out of the dense mist above Han Li's head before hurtling down with one crossed over the other. Han Li looked up to find that the two streaks of sword light had been unleashed by a pair of tall wooden puppets with long and slender limbs. Instead of retreating in the face of the attack, Han Li lunged forward instead, flying straight under the two streaks of sword light. As soon as he steadied himself, he instantly swiveled around, and a layer of azure light surfaced over his palm as he swung it toward the puppets in a chopping motion. The two puppets remained completely still, but their heads suddenly swiveled around 180 degrees to face Han Li in a rather unsettling fashion. At the same time, the joints of their sword-wielding hands also swiveled around, and one of the puppets parried Han Li's palm attack with its sword, while the other pierced its sword straight at Han Li's chest. Han Li hurriedly sprang back in retreat to evade the attack, and he was feeling quite surprised. The two puppets weren't giving off any aura at all, making it impossible to gauge their power level, but the swords that they were wielding were extremely formidable, as evidenced by the fact that it was able to slice through the azure light around his hand with ease. Immediately thereafter, several more streaks of sword light appeared above his head, then intertwined to form a golden sword net that swooped down upon him. Han Li raised a fist before throwing a punch upward, releasing an azure fist projection, which was instantly sliced apart upon contact with the golden sword net. Han Li swept a palm through the air once again, and this time, his heavy water true axis flew out of his sleeve before rising upward like a revolving millstone. The golden sword net appeared to be quite formidable, but upon coming into contact with the black light emanating from the heavy water true axis, it instantly melted away like snow tossed into a fire. Right at this moment, 5 more streaks of sword light flashed through the air, and 5 additional wooden puppets appeared around Han Li without any warning. As soon as these 5 puppets appeared, they were joined by the previous 2 puppets, which were charging at Han Li from behind with their swords aimed at the back of his chest. However, before they had a chance to stride, 2 gusts of fierce azure wind rose up from down below, enveloping the pair of puppets before dragging them downward. Han Li looked down to find Lu Yuqing wielding an azure feather fan that was radiating dazzling spiritual light, and with each wave, it was generating gusts of azure wind that trapped the wooden puppets inside. Han Li made a beckoning motion with one hand, then thrust it forward, and the heavy water true axis above his head instantly hurtled directly toward the puppet directly in front of him. The puppet reacted quite quickly, making a hand seal with one hand while thrusting its long sword downward with the other. A burst of golden light appeared on the tip of the longsword, and a massive golden sword projection erupted forth, crashing heavily into the heavy water true axis. An earth-shattering boom rang out, and the golden sword projection was instantly vanquished, while the sword-wielding puppet's body was also inundated and pulverized by the black light surging out of the heavy water true axis. After absorbing so much second-level heavy water, the heavy water true axis had become far more formidable than before. The other 4 sword-wielding puppets swiveled their heads around to lock their eyes on Han Li, and at the same time, a peculiar rune on each of their glabellas began to radiate golden light as they thrust the tips of their swords toward the heavens. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he cast his gaze upward, and a sense of foreboding instantly welled up in his heart. Sure enough, the faint glimmers of light began to appear above the mist that enshrouded the entire area, and the sky quickly began to rumble as if a thunderstorm were approaching. "Come to me, fellow Taoist Lu," he hurriedly yelled. Lu Yuqing immediately swept her fan through the air without any hesitation, releasing 2 fierce gusts of wind that blew the pair of puppets aside, then flew over to Han Li's side in a flash. She had only just gotten under the heavy water true axis when a burst of deafening rumbling began to ring out overhead, and a vast expanse of golden radiance descended from the heavens. It was a mass of countless streaks of golden swordlight, identical to the ones that Han Li had to contend with while attempting to fly to the mountain summit. Those streaks of swordlight had only been present to prevent people from taking flight, whereas this golden sword formation was purely designed to kill its target, so the swordlight within it was far more formidable than before. Not only that, but the descending streaks of swordlight were also imbued with faint hints of metal law fluctuations, and that was why Han Li had called Lu Yuqing to his side so urgently.